What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This is episode number 240. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line, as with every week, the Brinoceros, Brian Wong.
Yo, Marshall, what is going on? There's so many Magic sets. M15's right around the corner. Ah!
Yeah, it's getting overwhelming for us on the podcast, but there is we're having a transition day today. We are doing so. I got some stuff to tell you in a little bit, but just as a quick teaser, so we're doing the Sunset Show for Journey into Nyx and, of course, for the whole Theros block, because we're basically kissing it goodbye as we look forward to M15.
We just did our first impression show like 3 weeks ago. What is going on over here?
It honestly does feel like that to me too. Like it's crazy how fast they go, but at the same time, I'm ready. I'm ready for some core set action. I got to write my first couple of preview articles. One of them's up right now for M15, and there's a lot going on. We have a ton to cover in this show, so let's do that. But first, of course, let's talk about CardKingdom.com. They are the sponsor of this show, and they have been for a really long time. We're really happy that they are. They're a great place to buy Magic cards. That's what they specialize in. You can get other games there too, if you're into other board games and that kind of thing. But their specialty, their core whatever is Magic. That's what they've built their whole business on. That's what they sell. They know Magic. They get it. And they are a well-oiled machine when it comes to selling Magic cards. And we talk about it every once in a while on the show, Brian, but they're also a well-oiled machine when it comes to buying them.
Yeah, they have, I think 5 or 6 full-time graders constantly pulling in these cards. But it's because their prices on their buy list are so good that every now and then I just go through the list and look for stuff that I might have that they're buying for a great price. And just now I was just scrolling through it and seeing what I could find. And I saw some of these cards that caught my eye that I'm like, I think I may have some of these sitting around in my pile of rares that I thought these were junk rares. But let me read through a few and I'll tell you what price they're buying them for. M11 Serra Ascendant, $9.75. Mana Reflection, $11.75. Greater Oromancy, I didn't even know what that card did, $8.75.
Wow.
And then the hilariously underpowered Legends Thunder Spirit, $9.25. So
and those are cash prices, by the way.
Yeah, that's what they're paying in cash, and you get a 30% bonus if you take store credit instead.
30% is a
right.
Big bonus.
Which is pretty big if you want to, sell us some cards and get a box out of it or whatever and draft. That's what I would do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had a lot of experience selling cards to them, and I've helped a couple of friends out using their site, selling them too as well. And, I always do some spot checks back and forth, and by and large, Card Kingdom has the best buy prices. You do have to shop around a little bit if you want to try to get every cent out of every card. But I find that for my time, it's much easier for me to just go to one site, and I try to go to the one that gives me on average the highest back, and it's Card Kingdom, and that's awesome. So
I guess I should mention that those are the prices as of the time that we're recording, but their prices fluctuate up and down a little bit. So
of course,
and what they're buying is always changing, which is why I like to check it fairly often.
Yeah, so CardKingdom.com, make sure that you check them out for all of your Magic needs. Now, we read an email last week to kick off the show, and I want to try to doing that again. I think it's kind of a cool idea, and we can start integrating these in. So this one is from, I have his name, and I didn't write it down on here for some reason, and I'll gather it in just a minute. But
you read the email, I'll find it.
Okay, you do that. So he says, "Hey guys, I had a great story I wanted to share that summed up so many limited resources lessons that I thought you might appreciate. I'm relatively new to Magic, but I've come to love playing in the limited environment in no small part due to your great podcast. Thank you." His name is Warren Smith, right? That's what his name is. Mm-hmm. I've corresponded with Warren before as well. He says, in a recent limited tournament, I stuck to Marshall's strategy of keeping your colors open early and to watch for signals. So while I started out green-white in Pack 1, I got a 6th pick Blade Tusk Boar, thought that red might be opened, and even though I had an Elfmer and some solid green early picks, I made the switch to red, and it paid off handsomely. Or so I thought. He says, I eked out a narrow win in the first round, but in the second round, I lost game 1 of my match and mulled all the way down to 4, playing an aggressive red-white build. So I think we've all been there before. Mm-hmm. When I made my decision to mull to 4, my opponent chuckled and said, I actually hope you win. Guess he was feeling pretty sorry for me. My opponent opened on a hopeful Eidolon, and he says, a little too much swagger, because the guy just played a 1-drop Eidolon, into an Oresco Sun Guide, and I'm on an empty board. It's looking very ugly. My opponent gets up to over 30 life. I have no answers on the board, and my life is dipping into the single digits. Pretty sure that's game. In the distance, I swear I hear the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi whispering, "Don't
Do I read
concede."
this part?
Yeah, you do it. You do it.
Don't concede. Play it out, Warren.
And that's exactly how I imagined that. And how did I know that it was the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi? Because guess what the top of my deck reveals on my 4th land drop? A Borderland Minotaur. All of a sudden, there's a glimmer of hope, and slowly but surely, I somehow crawl back into the game and eke out the narrowest of victories. I went on to win that match and the entire tournament with a perfect record, no less. Anyways, this is one tournament I 100% attribute my win to the lessons I've learned for your podcast this year. So thanks again for all the advice. Keep up the great show, and I hope to see both of you at an upcoming GP. So that was fun. We love to hear stuff like that. It's just awesome for Brian and I to get reinforcement like that, and we get a lot of it. And I just thought it would be fun to read Warren's email here too, because what a cool story, right? I mean, mulliganing to 4 and winning is a story in and of itself, but he goes on to win the tournament as well. Pretty great stuff.
Yeah, like I wouldn't say I do it all the time, but you always like see like a raised eyebrow when you mulligan to 4. But in my opinion, like a random 4-card hand is better than like those 5-card hands that have no chance. Those no land, 5 expensive spells. I can't keep that hand. Like if you get the perfect 4, you have a chance, and you're trying to go from, a 2% chance to win up to a 3% chance to win or something like that. Mm-hmm. And you just figure, all right, I'm gonna take my shot and try to get my 3% or whatever it is out. And every now and then you win. Like I've won on 4 more times than I can count in my many years, but. If you just give up at any point, you're going to have 0%.
Exactly. And I think that's great that Warren took the time to write us. So next up, we've got a major announcement that came out of Wizards of the Coast earlier this week. And Brian and I both, we are pretty picky about what we talk about on the show as far as Magic community stuff goes, because we like to keep the show focused on limited and strategy. And that way, when you come here, you know what you're getting, right? You come here for the strategy, for the limited talk, and we try not to go off topic about talking about stuff that isn't really relevant to that, even though we have our opinions and, we wouldn't mind taking some time on it sometimes. Most of the time we try to avoid it and let the other podcasts kind of hash that kind of stuff out. But this one is very relevant to us and very relevant to a lot of our listeners. So we thought we'd take a chance to chime in on this. Magic Online.
Yeah.
So basically, to cut to the short, they're getting rid of the current V3 client in about a month, in a little less than a month. Middle of July, I think it was the 16th or something like that. They are going to be taking down the old client and replacing it with what we now call the beta. We're just going to be calling it V4. I'm assuming when it goes live, it's the 4th official version of Magic Online, and that will be your only option to play on Magic Online. So if you've had a chance to try out the beta, or if you've seen some people stream with it or whatever, that is what you're going to be playing Magic Online with, and you will not have a choice to play with the current client anymore.
Yeah, I'm kind of sad to lose version 3, honestly. It's not the best thing in the world, but it feels like family. You kind of like, you've learned to live with all of its faults, and
exactly.
I'm gonna miss it.
Yeah, I am too. I want to know your opinion, Brian, so there's been a huge backlash in the community on this.
Sure.
People are really frustrated about this whole thing because they feel like the new client coming in isn't up to snuff. It's not ready. It's not adequate, and it's not going to serve their needs as well as the old client did. And they feel like Wizards of the Coast is forcing the new client on them, even though they don't want it to be.
Yeah. I definitely think that there are some really legitimate complaints about the new client. Certain things like it's just harder to see what's in play. The cards are smaller. That poses a big issue for streamers. Like our friend, Kenji is one of them. But
yeah.
It's just hard to be able to see what's in his hand, to read the text of those cards, see what's in play. You kind of have to pick and choose one or the other. And just as far as like streaming, that's a big deal. The new client, takes more memory. That can also be an issue for streamers if your computer isn't strong enough to deal with all that. That's an issue. For a game that feels like it's mostly text and just some pictures, like I don't know why it's taking so much memory. That feels like an issue to me. I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to get used to, and I think definitely there's going to be always a negative response just to anything that's new that you have to get used to. But in this case, I do think there are, actually legitimate complaints about the new client.
Yeah, so I used to work in software development. I was a QA tester for a website, which is similar actually to a Magic Online client. It's a server and a client relationship, and that's pretty much what a website is too. And I have to say that I feel like the reaction from the community has been a little bit blown out of proportion. I've seen some people saying that they're going to quit Magic Online. They're just not going to play anymore. And I just kind of look at that with a very skeptical eye. Like, are you really? Like, no way. Like, this client is not what we want it to be. That I understand. It's not what I want it to be either. I'm not happy with it, right? I think it should be a lot better. One thing about software is that when you move from one piece of software to the next version of it, the expectation is that things are going to be better. And this next version of Magic Online is in a few ways better and is actually in a few ways worse than the old one. And that's unacceptable. That really is a huge, huge issue. And I think that Wizards of the Coast are aware of it. But it's still, I can see where the people are coming from with their frustration because it's just not up to our expectations. When they put a couple of years into a thing and then they give it to us and it's about, I would call it roughly as good as what we already have. That's unacceptable. Like, that just sucks, right? Because now we have to change. We have to adapt to this new thing. There's definitely some downsides to it compared to the old one. And that's a tough pill to swallow. So I understand the frustration. But the thing that I feel like people aren't paying attention to or aren't just accepting is that you can still play Magic on this. Like,
oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The client we have now is not good. Like, you show that to somebody who isn't used to it and they're like, what am I doing? And why is it 1997 again? Because everything just looks horrifically old. And I think that people have gotten so used to that client that they've sort of let it fog their vision about how bad it is. And so in my mind, what's happening is they're moving to a platform, hopefully, that they can work better with. Like, it's more malleable. It's something that they can adjust and add stuff to more easily than they could the old one. So hopefully what happens is they move over. They get to put all of their resources onto the new client. That's the V4 client. Remember, right now, they have to maintain version 3. Whenever a new set comes out, they have to do all the stuff for it on the front end. Now they get to just leave all that behind and put laser focuses on V4, which hopefully will get it up to snuff. Now, if their track record says anything, that's disappointing because their track record sucks. Like, they have not put out a great product, right? I mean, let's just be honest. Look, I have friends who work there, and I know that it's a lot harder than it seems from the outside. So I get it. Like, I'm not trying to, throw anybody under the bus or anything, but in the world of video games, in the world of software development, working for 2 years on a product and then having it just sort of come out subpar is really pretty frustrating. So that's why you see a lot of that frustration. But man, I really think that this move needed to happen and was going to happen. And I just don't really side with the people that are so hyperbolic about it, about I'm going to quit or this thing's just horrific. Like, have you played it? It's fine. Like, it's not great. I wouldn't put that in front of somebody and say, look at this awesome piece of software that I made. Right. But at the same time, it's it does allow you to play Magic Online. You do get to draft. There's definitely some improvements and I could see room for more improvements. And I'm just going to have to put my faith in Wizards that they've listened to us and that with their resources all allocated onto one thing, that things are going to get better.
Yeah, I think I always try to come at this from a realist perspective, but you hear people being like, oh, they need to just take V4 and just put it in the garbage and start completely from scratch.
I know, I always hear that.
That's just not going to happen. Put yourself in the shoes. You're executive producer of Magic Online, Worth Wolpert, right? That's you, and you realize, all right, this program hasn't really fulfilled our own expectations. It's not coming along as fast as we had hoped. There are things that we wish we could change, but there's a lot of difficulties with it. If you go to your boss after working on this thing for 3 or 4 years and say we haven't made any progress, we want to start over, you need to bring in your resignation at the same time. Right. That's not going to happen. They set a date that they're going to say this is when we think it's going to be ready for full time. and they've tried to meet that date, and they've had some issues. Like it's come along slowly, maybe not as far as they would hoped, but at some point you have to be like, all right, here's the thing, this is what we made, like I'm putting my job on the line, because if you don't, like you can't just stall forever. I just don't think it's realistic to expect anything other than what's happening. I think this is like the inevitable thing that's going to happen, and trust me, the people on the inside know that it's not great. Like they're not blind to that.
Right. And they hear all the feedback and they do listen. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they can't comment on, I'm assuming, publicly or whatever, but that stuff gets bounced off the walls, and, they hear stuff. I know that, for example, I know personally that Worth Wolpert is very open to listening to what people are saying, even if it's not favorable. Right. I think some people think that they're turning a blind eye to anybody who's being critical of them. And that's not true. I know that, like, I can email Worth, anybody can. I mean it. Like, you really can email him, and he will answer your email, or at least he will read it. I guess maybe I can't say that he'll answer it, but he for sure reads those. I've had personal discussions with him and emails with him myself, trying to give him feedback or whatever on this type of stuff. And he does read it. He really does. So you can let him know. And I mean, that means that he knows that people aren't happy with it, right? And he's doing what he can do to fix it, and everybody down there is going to do what they can do to fix it. And I mean, look, I don't pull any punches, right? Like I just said, I don't think the thing's up to snuff. I wouldn't be proud of it. I don't think that it's ready to go out. It's just, you got to cut the cord sometime, right? Like we need to get the people that are working on both clients working on one client. And it's just like, it just slows everything down to a crawl if you have your workforce diversified like that. You have to have it unified onto one thing before you can start really making progress. And I don't know if it's going to happen. I hope it does. I mean, I'm sitting over here. I play Magic Online every day, so it's a big deal to me for sure. That memory leak thing sucks. It's really annoying. My computer will slow down, and I have a ridiculous computer, for doing all the videos and the podcasting and stuff. I have a sweet computer, and it's still just like, I can hear the fans coming on, and, I'm just like, great. I got to restart Windows or whatever on my computer to fix this thing, and it's like, that kind of stuff's really annoying. But my hope is that they do it. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but right when I came back to Magic was when they were going from 2.5 to 3.0, and everybody freaked out then too.
Oh, every single time. I've been around for the entire breadth of Magic Online since the original beta. Yeah, the new releases always go over pretty badly at first. Version 3 had a bad memory leak in it for a long time, and it got fixed.
There you go.
It still uses a ton of memory, but it doesn't just like, keep going until your computer like can hardly move. But yeah, like that will get fixed. When? Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. And so I think what the best, most reasonable response to this is to accept it, just to say, okay, this is happening, right? I don't need to freak out and sell my whole collection. I don't need to, start calling for people's heads on a spike or whatever. It's just that this is going to happen. So what can I do to try to make this the best possible? Well, first thing you can do is tell them what you think. Magic Online feedback at wizards.com is the one that you can get to Worth at, and you can just tell them, I'm really unhappy about this. I don't like this. Or you can tell them, look, I understand what's going on. I hope you guys find a way to make this better. Or you can just give them direct feedback and say, look, I tried to do this trade the other day and it didn't work, and I'd really like it if the trade system did this, right? And just the more, think of it as votes. Like those things add up, right? And he will read them, and that stuff will get into the ears of the right people, and hopefully, we all hope that things will get better on that end. My guess, like if I were to predict, I would say they're going to take a hit from this, because there will be some people that are just like, screw it. But most people will be like, oh, this is about what we had before. It just looks a little different, and some things are better and some things are worse. So I can just still play Magic. So I'm just going to keep playing Magic on it. And then it'll slowly creep up to adequate again. Right. The downside is, the elephant in the room here is that we all want just an awesome Magic Online experience, right? Like, I'm hoping that it gets back to adequate in some time frame, right? Yeah. And that's a really low bar, right? I mean, for a company as big and powerful as Hasbro/Wizards of the Coast, we would hope that they would give us just a kick-ass program, right? Just like, wow, like this is mind-blowing what they did with this, and giving us the basics that we've been asking for, like leagues and stuff like that. these are the expectations, right? We don't expect adequate. We expect awesome, because Wizards of the Coast consistently gives us awesome, but with Magic Online, they don't. And so I think that managing expectations is the big key there. And my expectations are, let's get this thing back to adequate. And I mean, I'm not happy about it, but that's where I need it to be so that I can do the videos that I do and I can play the Magic that I want to play. And anything above that, I'm hopeful for. But for now, I'm aiming a little low.
Yeah, I mean, I just needed to play Magic. Like, if I can do that, you know, and my computer will survive and not start smoking or whatever, and, you know, I can trade my cards effectively and whatever. Like, if those things work, you know, that's the most important thing. I need to be able to, like, tell what's going on in the game. Everything needs to work correctly. Everything else is kind of a bonus, but I need that.
That's right. Okay, so that's the limited resources take on the whole Magic Online thing. Let's stay hopeful. Let's keep giving feedback to Wizards, and let's see where this thing goes. Brian.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to hear this from you because I've seen some scathing tweets over the course of the week, and I want to know what's going on between you and Vintage Masters.
I quit Vintage Masters, and not like in
you had a
rage.
falling out.
Yeah, I just realized that, you know, I was playing like tons of Vintage Masters every single day, and I just realized, like, I don't actually find this that fun. And to me, like, I'm playing a game for fun, right? That's the reason I'm playing. So I was trying to figure out why is that? And this is kind of the conclusion I came to. So I think when you play like a cube draft, like broken, super powerful things happen like 90% of the time, something like that. It's like usually, you know, people's draws do busted stuff.
Yeah, somebody's going off.
Yeah, or you play like a regular booster draft, like Theros block. You know, busted things only happen 10% of the time, right? Maybe you only get a busted draw 10% of the time.
Right.
But in Vintage Masters, it feels like you get a busted draw roughly 50% of the time. Now, the problem with this is that it creates the most frequent imbalanced games, because it's if player A has a 50% chance to have a busted draw, and player B has a 50% chance to get a busted draw, that's like half of your games where one person has it and the other person doesn't. And it's just like you just have like a complete blowout of a game. And, you know, occasionally, you know, you get games where both players had good draws or both players had bad draws, and you actually get to play Magic and it's fun. But so many times it feels like one player is like turn one Sol Ring and one player is like hard casting Keen Eye Avens. And you're just not playing a game of Magic.
Right.
It's just not fun.
I mean, I think that they had to be worried about balance issues from the beginning, right?
Yeah, but it's also not just like the mythics, like Sol Ring and Library of Alexandria. It's also just like turn 2 Lightning Rift is like almost unbeatable. Like turn 2 Lightning Rift, like if you're the Lightning Rift deck, you just feel like a god. Like it's like your deck has like 17 electrolyzers in it, and like, you know, like 5 of them are lands. You know, it's just insane. And then you're playing that deck and you don't draw Lightning Rift and you just can't do anything. So it's just like, it just feels like your hand is either like a complete blowout, either you like, you know, flashback Battle Screech, or you don't. And it's just like one player gets the blowout and one player doesn't, and it's just not that fun to me. So I basically look at the format. It's like, okay, it's like Cube Draft, but not as fun. It costs twice as much, but you get 3 lottery tickets.
Right.
And it's like, would I really sign up for that if that's how someone explained it to me? And I don't think I would. So I just like, I might play here and there, but I'm not going to hammer VMA anymore. I just got kind of fed up with it.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting take on it. I haven't quite hit that point yet. I don't think I've played it quite as much as you. Yeah. But I've played a decent amount, and I'm still enjoying it. I'm still exploring it. But, you know, one of the reasons that discussion came up on Twitter at all was because I begrudgingly started drafting the Rites of Initiation style deck. And after just losing to it a few times and just being like really, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I'm being overly complainy about it or not. Like, it feels completely busted though. And all I did was just like play reasonable Magic, you know, like I like in the game I played like, you know, good stuff. Like I had one of those good draws for myself, and it just didn't matter. And I'm like, well, I guess I'd rather have the draw where I can just play literally any creatures, you know, 1/1 for 1, whatever, and just puke them onto the battlefield and then just attack. And yeah, I mean, for my first 4 games with it, which was like round 1 and round 2, all of my wins, I did Falter plus Rights with like 3 creatures out both times and just killed my opponent. You know, and I got the chat, you know, really again. for real, you know, and it's like, I don't blame them. I'm like, I don't chat with people generally on when they do that because I know they're just venting, but like, I'm kind of like, I feel you, man. Like I was that guy. And now I'm just like, well, if you can't beat him, but I gotta say, it wasn't fun. Like I was like, okay, I got him, but like, so what? Right? Like rights just feels so not interactive to me. And it's kind of this classic, like, I think that this is not a good way for Wizards developers to approach these type of problems, but I can just so see it as being like, you know, this red-white deck just isn't quite powerful enough. It's not winning enough. What can we do? And somebody's like, well, what about this one? And they're like, oh, yeah, let's try that. And then it's like, oh, now it wins more. Great. Problem solved, right? The problem is that this follows like the same lines that I've heard from about different cards from Wizards developers, even like Pack Rat and stuff. You know, which is like, well, sometimes the bad players have to win too. It's like, okay, that's fair. So you put Pack Rat in the set, and then they just win if they get a Pack Rat and they get it on turn 2 in that format because it was almost unstoppable there, right? Mm-hmm. And the problem I've always had with these type of arguments is just that while the numbers in aggregate might even out or come to where they want them, the gameplay experience to get there is horrible often for both players. Like, yeah. I mean, I played the Rites of Initiation deck and did not have a particularly fun time with it. And I'm not trying to say that nobody could, but, you know, like playing red, you win the game isn't that fun. It's just not. Like, even if somebody comes up to me and says, no, I think that's super fun. I'm like, yeah, well, you'd probably like a card that was just like, you know, red does 20 damage, right? Like, okay, you're having fun, but that's not a fun experience, right? And obviously Rights makes you work a lot harder than that, right? I mean, but it's just one of those really high variance cards where it's like, it's either the worst card ever, like you can't even cast it, or it just wins, right? And it's like, it kind of makes you work in the deck build phase, but I just don't think it really has the payoff there. And there's been quite a few things like that. For example, I also, in that same one, I faced the Blue-Green Madness deck in the finals, and it was a very, very good version of it. And my opponent played 2 Arrogant Worms in combat twice. And I'm just like, well, I can never beat that.
Right.
Like, just never, ever beat that. And I didn't, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like, you know, there are like a bunch of set archetypes. And if you just get the God start, you win. And if you don't, you lose. And it's like, I just kind of found that it's like, oh yeah, you get the turn 2 Mongrel, turn 3 Arrogant Worm, then you win. If you get the, you know, Curve Out into Battle Scrates, you win, whatever. And like, it I don't know, I just didn't actually feel like I was playing Magic enough. I don't know. It just kind of felt like, it's like, let's see if my draw is good or not. And let's see if their draw is good or not. And then, you know, maybe if we're somehow in the same echelon, we'll be okay. My other main complaint with it is, there's kind of a reason that some of these cards were uncommons before or rares before, and now you have like Goblin Trenches that uncommon. Like, yeah, I get you want to make a powerful set, but that card's not fun. And I know that they put like they had to put, you know, put answers in the set to kind of like deal with it, right? So you have the Death's Head Buzzards or whatever, so you can sideboard in all these Death Head Buzzards. I don't know. Is it really fun to side in a bunch of like crappy Death's Head Buzzards so you can have a chance against their Goblin Trenches? Like, maybe. I mean, I do it.
Even then, though, like Death's Head Buzzard, I had a chat with Jacob Van Lunen about this, and because he said, well, there's Death's Head Buzzard. There's a lot of times where that just doesn't do what you need it to do.
Right. Yeah,
like, that's the best answer. And if they have trenches, they're like, oh, I'll just wait a couple of turns and make more and just hit you in one shot.
Right.
You know, and Rights is the same thing. What's it called? Reckless Charge is similar, where it's just like those cards just don't really care about Death's Head Buzzard that much, especially in relation to speed. You just overwhelm them. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the format's sweet. I've still been drafting it, and I'm still enjoying it, so I'm not quite where you're at with it. But I've definitely gotten hints of this where I'm just like, well, that wasn't really a game of Magic. Next. And I've been on both ends of it, and I don't really love that. I think that's one of the things about Cube is that happens fairly rarely, even in Powered Cube somehow. More often, but especially in non-powered cube, it's just like, you know, you tend to get games. And I'm surprised at that. Like, looking at a lot of the cube decks that you'll see hanging around, it's actually surprising me that you get games, but you tend to. And in VMA, it seems like maybe you get a little less. I
just think, because in cube, because it's even more powerful than this, you just get a lot of games where both players are doing powerful things. You get that a lot. You know, where I made 10 goblins on turn 2 and lost. You know, like there's you can do some crazy stuff. You know, like but I just the fact that in Cube, it's very consistent. You can do that, but in VMA, it's like sometimes you're playing limited, but sometimes you're playing Type 1. Sometimes you're playing vintage. Like it just like the diversity and the power level of your draws is so extreme that it just feels like, yeah, sometimes you're just hard casting 4-mana 2/3 flyers, and it's like, ugh,
yeah,
it's disgusting.
Have you opened Power? I forgot.
Yeah, I have a Time Walk.
Boo.
Yeah,
I don't have anything.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main reason I've been playing it, but it's like, why don't I just play Magic that I find fun instead?
Yeah, I think that's a fine choice. I will be continuing to battle on the Vintage Masters felt. Next, got a big show next week. We've got a big milestone show for us next week. We're on episode 241, and we've decided to make that our big, sort of celebratory episode, as opposed to waiting until like 300 or something like that. We decided that, the value episode, the 2-for-1 episode, was the one that we wanted to go with. So episode 241 is going to be kind of a special one. We're going to do it in two different pieces. The first piece is going to be kind of just, Brian and I talking about the show and taking a little time to indulge ourselves a little bit about that, personal stuff in the show and how things are going with that. And we're going to have a lot of guest appearances. They're going to be pre-recorded guest appearances as opposed to live, because it means that I can integrate them all into the show in like a timely fashion, where trying to get people lined up is asking a lot of our guests. And so we try to, keep it easier on them, but we're going to have a lot of fun with that. And then the second half of the episode 241 is going to be a strategy segment about
card advantage. Obviously. Can you stop calling it 241 and start calling it 2-for-1?
Yes, I will do that.
Okay, thank you. Because it's really you're totally ruining the double meaning.
I'm trying to hide it. I think it's cuter if we don't.
It was hidden so well for me because I totally didn't understand why we were doing a special episode until somebody explained that. But when you actually say it out, if you say, "Oh, it's episode 2-for-1," then I get it.
Yeah, it's the most value episode possible, and you only get to do it once. So we decided to make it special. So it's going to be a really fun one next week. We certainly implore you to come join us for that. It's going to be a good time with a lot of fun guests too.
You know what's better than a 2-for-1?
What's that?
3-for-1.
Oh, let's do that. Oh, I like that.
Now we're going to be like, 4-for-30 or whatever. Yeah, oh my God.
We should have done a really boring show on 1-for-1. Just like yeah, nothing exciting, right?
1-for-9.
Yeah,
I don't know.
All right, let's do a Crack-a-Pack. This is our last Crack-a-Pack for the Journey into Nyx, and then of course the Theros block. So we're going to do it a little quickly here. I mean, we all know the cards by now, I think, and we're going to kind of burn through it here because we've got a lot to talk about for the rest of the show. I did want to say thank you though. We have received packs for Journey and a couple of Born of the Gods from listeners. They've handed them to me while I was at GP's and said, "Hey, do you want to use this for the Crack-a-Pack?" And I'm like, "Sure." But unfortunately, we just don't have enough shows to do all the packs that I have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in the vault. And when we want to do like a flashback Crack-a-Pack, or if we have some other use, maybe a listener's in town and we want to draft, we can spot him the packs or whatever. And so yeah, I'm gonna hang on to these, but we're gonna open one right now. So I did want to thank the people that gave me the packs though. So Matt, Sean, and Kenny, thank you. John Dickens, thank you. Travis, thank you. Steven, thank you. Ron Ryder, thank you. And Joe, thank you. I got a lot of these from GP Chicago recently and also a couple of GPs before that. So very kind of you guys. We certainly appreciate it. It's really kind of you. And let's get this thing open.
We're not going to say whose pack this is. It could be any of yours.
Yeah. Could have been mine. All right,
they're all yours now.
Yeah. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Font of Vigor.
No.
Right in the garbage can.
That's the life gain?
Yeah.
No.
Crewfix's Insight.
I've played it, but I'm not happy about it.
All right. Farika's Chosen.
Yeah, I've played it, and I've been very happy about it.
Countermand.
I don't know if I've ever actually seen that card cast. Have you?
I played it once.
It
was in sealed.
It does what you think it would do.
Yep. Not very good. Lightning Diadem.
I've put it in my deck before, and thankfully never drew it.
Eagle of the Watch.
Super average card,
It's
but
just the averages.
yeah. I mean, you don't cut it, right? You play it.
No,
Yeah.
you don't. Pin to the Earth.
Yeah, big overperformer. Yeah, we've definitely become huge fans of it, but just like the cheapest way to knock out a creature in this set.
It is, especially if you're looking to lengthen the game.
Yeah.
Renowned Weaver.
This I'm still a little bit lost on this card if it's good or not. It's definitely okay.
It's definitely okay. Flurry of Horns.
That's my boy.
Yeah, that guy's good.
Them's my boys, I guess.
Yeah.
This is a huge overperformer. Like, this card does work, and you were actually a big fan in the set review, and I was a little bit skeptical.
Yeah.
I kind of thought those 2/3s would get outclassed by the time you hit turn 5. But the thing is, if you're adding it to an aggressive arsenal, you have other things too. It takes a while to chip away at multiple 2/3s. Like, that's a big butt, and with the rest of your strike force coming in too, it just usually creates alpha strike 2 turns in a row, and that's game.
Yeah, the haste just pushed that card over the top.
Mm-hmm.
Thassa's Devourer. Oh, my old friend Thassa's Devourer.
Have you drafted that deck anytime recently?
Nope.
No.
I'm off it. I had my fun, but no, it's not a real thing. Disciple of Deceit.
That's the blue-black 1/3 inspired.
Correct.
It helps you tutor.
Yeah.
I mean, I actually like it on that deck.
I do too. It's just you can't really first pick it, right? It's just not strong enough to go.
It's definitely not a powerful enough gold card that I'm going to be like, I'm going to force it. It's even in the deck. It's merely like a role player. It's just like a slightly better version of Omen Speaker or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Omen Speaker certainly gives it a run for its money.
Right.
Sightless Brawler.
The white bestow.
Cannot attack alone.
Yeah, I found it to be pretty cool, and it actually goes well in almost any kind of deck. Because if you're aggressive, you're gonna have other stuff to attack with, and if you're defensive, it's a pretty good blocker.
Yeah,
so it's kind of fun.
Nice finisher too.
Sure.
If you have multiple attackers. Here's one. I think the only playable build around me, Strength from the Fallen.
Playable is so you say.
Yeah, I mean, I do put it in the borderline, but I think it's pretty good, actually. I've drafted it multiple times, and I've been impressed by it every time. I think it's decent.
Yeah, I've never had somebody do it against me, I don't think, or maybe they did, and it was just like only +1/+1 or something. It was just like not good.
Yeah.
But I can definitely see how it could be powerful. It just hasn't happened to me, and I'm a little scared of kind of going all in on that type of thing.
Yep. Dictate of Karametra is our rare. That's the mana doubler.
Mana doubler.
Bzz. This pack was stinky. Freak
really...
is Chosen or Flurry of Horns is what I have pulled aside here.
Yeah, I could see maybe taking the Sightless Brawler or something if you're...
Pin to the Earth, maybe?
Sure.
What do you like? You going with your horns here or what?
Eesh. Yeah, that's
first pick horns.
I mean, out of that pack, I think this pack is just going to come down to what your color preferences are. Honestly, I have a preference for both red and black, so I'm looking at that Chosen. I'm looking at that Flurry. Yeah, maybe I just take my Flurry. Like, geez, I mean, usually you expect to get that card late, but this pack is bad. Also, when you first pick a card out of this type of pack, you are perfectly willing to give it up with your next pick, no matter what. Like you take Flurry, and your next pack has maybe the Fleet Feather Cockatrice or something like that. You can be like, all right, screw Flurry, I'm taking that, and I'm giving up on it immediately. You don't have to feel bad.
I like that. A lot of people think that drafting like a colorless card keeps you open. Brian Wong says draft bad cards and stay open.
It happens. Or sometimes you just like your first pick is like a rare draft, right? And you're just like, yeah, this card is worth like 10 tickets. That's why I'm taking it. And it's playable, but has marginal play value. Don't consider that too strongly when you're making your next pick. And that's kind of how I look at a pack like this too. It's where it's like, this is like all these cards are like, I don't know, 6th picks.
Yeah, 4 through 6, something like that.
That's where you'd expect to get them if you were that deck. So these are not locking me into anything. But I'll take a Flurry because I have preference for Minotaurs.
I'm going to take Pin to the Earth. Let's go long. I want to make my last draft of Journey to Nyx a long one.
You're not going to take that Strength of the Fallen?
I could. Like, I could just try to go off the deep end, but it does wheel. Like, it's not like hotly contested or anything. So it's a really fun card.
If you're going to wheel it, you're going to take the Chosen then and try to wheel the Strength.
Right.
Out of this pack, I don't know if you can wheel anything. Like, it's horrendous.
It is really bad. All right, so that's it. There's our Crack-A-Pack. Do you want to start? So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the Sunset Show, right? So this is where we talk about basically the block/set that we just had, and we reflect on it. We look back. We look back at maybe some of the cards that stood out to us, made an impression, some of our favorite cards, some of our least favorite cards, maybe some of the evaluations that changed over the course of it, and also just look at it from a big picture perspective and just say, oh, how was this set?
Right.
Would I draft it again? Is it one of my favorites? Is it one of my least favorites? How good of a job did they do balancing the format? All that kind of stuff, and just sort of give our thoughts on that. So where should we start, Brian?
Well, we're not just saying goodbye to Journey. We're saying goodbye to the entirety of Theros block.
Right.
So that's special.
It's a big deal. I mean, we've had a long run with Theros block here. What has it been, 10 months or whatever it is? And we're about to say goodbye.
All right. I think we'll start with this question, which is, a lot of times new players, the very first time they play a set, this is what they want to know. What's the best card in the set? What's the bombiest of all of the bombs?
Like, what's the card that you just want to open more than anything?
Yeah.
So what we're going to do for these type of questions and these type of, we don't like to call them awards because they're not really awards. They're just, sort of, we're highlighting certain types of cards, but we've got it set up by set and by block. So we're going to talk about Journey, and then we're going to talk about for the whole block, maybe something that stood out to us for there.
Yeah.
What did you have for biggest bomb in Journey?
I thought it was a Johnny. I just thought that card had the most impact of any card in the set. Just hard to get rid of, and if you untap with a Johnny and get a second activation out of it, it's going to be pretty tough to lose.
Yeah. I had Silence the Believers.
Oh, absolutely.
Just the most powerful, right? It's just like the most rawly powerful that asks the least of you. Like, you're always going to want to kill something.
Mm-hmm. How could Silence the Believers be a bad draw? Like, it's
exactly.
It's inconceivable.
It is. As long as you can make black mana,
right,
it's good to go. And Johnny's a gold card, whatever. But if we're just going like the bombiest bomb possible, I'm kind of with you. I think it's probably just a Johnny.
Right. And for the full block,
Elspeth.
Oh yeah, Elspeth. Elspeth.
Boom, Elspeth.
Yeah, thank God it was a mythic, because I did not want to play against that card very often.
No, it was really a bear to try to wrestle with Elspeth in a fair game of Magic. It's just warping. You needed certain types of cards to be able to work your way to a victory with Elspeth on the board, and there just wasn't a lot of that floating around.
Yeah, I remember watching the Pro Tour. The Pro Tour is like block constructed, and there's decks that are splashing Elspeth. It's like their only white card in the entire deck.
Yeah,
like,
that's true. Green, splash Elspeth.
Yeah, and that's constructed, and like those decks were very powerful. Like in draft, Elspeth was a joke. Like, yeah, so hard to lose if you cast that.
Exactly. All right, so Elspeth. What's the next one we got here?
So what card did you never get a chance to play, but you really wish that you had?
You had to do this to me right off the bat, didn't you? I never got to do it.
Do what?
I never got to take the Chromanticore challenge for myself.
Me neither, Marshall.
Never got it. I'm like, the whole run of Born of the Gods, which is, of course, where you want it because then you're opening it. But even then, I would still just like, I'll just pick up this, late whatever, market festival or whatever, just in case. And I mean, I did have it passed to me a couple of times in my life, after Journey to Nyx, of course, came out. I never got it in what's it called. But even then, I was like, blue-white aggro, just like with all these, heroic cards or whatever. And I'm just like, really? 6th pick Chromanticore out of the second pack, and I just have to ship it along or whatever. So, yeah, I'm just going to have to be happy with the foil one I got from our friends at Magic the Ametrine, and I'm going to have Ryan sign it next time I see him. And the legend of Chromanticore will die there for me.
Yeah, it was the exact same for me. Like I think the second ever draft I did, there was like a second pick Chromanticore, and I was like, oh, Chromanticore challenge, that's cool. And I was like, this is one of my first drafts. Like, I just need to like learn the format. I'm gonna draft a regular deck, and then just never had the chance again. And every time I would see it after that, it's like, yeah, it's like the 27th pick of the draft. It's like the very last possible pick is Chromanticore. Like I can't move in on Chromanticore at that point. It's too late.
It always eluded me.
Yeah, the other one that was, just more of a normal card was Hunter's Prowess. I never
got to Hunter's Prowess?
And like it just seems like it would feel so good. Like smash you for
Let's
like a bunch.
Let's stop the recording. I'm
going
to come down to your house, give you a hug. I'll come back and we'll resume recording because that is sad.
I know it's got to be a great feeling because I love drawing cards and I love dealing damage. Like, what could be better?
I did. I drew 13 off of it once.
That sounds very dangerous.
Yeah, it was actually just like definitely the wrong play. And I carefully weighed my options and decided, no. Like, I need to get a story, right? Like, I get a story for that. And I mean, it wasn't dramatically worse play than my other option. It was just it was like, well, I can get blown out here. If I play the other way, I just really can't. And I'm just like, but even if I get blown out, like, I don't lose. So I'm like, and so I just ran it out there and we got him. 13. Right. What about for the set?
Yeah, for me, probably the biggest one that I missed out on was Harness by Force. Like,
oh man!
I mean, that was a card that in the set review I thought had a lot of potential.
You were right.
And then heard just story after story of like, yeah, that card's insane. Like they stabilized for like 5 turns, and I just took their 2 biggest things and killed them with it. I was like, God, I really want to do that, especially because I play a lot of red aggressive decks, and I really like.
You know how you get ahead when you're being a red aggressive deck and you've got a threaten effect in your hand. Yeah. And you just feel like it doesn't matter what they do here, right? Oh, yeah, it's just like cast anything. I dare you, bro, right? The bigger, the better, right? The better the card you play here, the worse you're going to die. With Harness by Force, it's like they can be stable and tapping for their next stabilizer, and you're just like, bring it. I mean, they have like a monstrous snake on the board, and they're tapping 6 mana, and you're like, no problem. It's just unbelievable. Card's fantastic.
Yeah, and at Uncommon, I never got to play Fleet Feather Cockatrice.
What?
Seems unbelievable, but
I question your commitment, sir.
I just never saw one in the draft portion. It just never happened. Like,
no, that's annoying.
Yeah, I don't know how that's possible. It's the mythic Uncommon of the set.
So for me, Godsend. I thought that our rating of it was pretty fair, right? Like, we obviously recognize it as a very powerful card that's going to take over any type of stalemated board, but also recognize that it costs a lot to equip, and it's not the easiest card to make work. Never saw it. Just never saw Godsend. So there was that. Yeah,
it's always fun to actually get to play with the card that maybe, I mean, we still said you should draft it and you should play it.
Yeah.
But just not that it's like the best card in the set, like some people were kind of hoping it would be.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice to actually get to play with it and kind of see if you can confirm your observations or find new observations. But just never had that chance either.
You know what's weird? Nobody ever played it against me either.
Oh.
Like, I never lost to it or whatever. The other card that I wanted to play quite a bit was Keranos, God of Storms.
Oh, yeah, that card seems really fun.
It just seems fun and strong and build-aroundable and splashable. And I was kind of picturing it maybe with, like, in a blue-black shell with, Pin to the Earths and stuff. And then eventually you take over the game with Keranos off of a little splashy splash. But that never happened for me. I did play Crewfix. That was miserable. I played Karametra. That was pretty darn miserable too. But I never got to play Keranos.
So you were settling for the older, uglier sister when you really wanted it.
I mean, I went deep. I went for the mom, like, or grandma, or like. I mean, Crewfix was bad.
Yeah.
Crewfix was really bad.
It's like the pet ox or whatever that you're settling for. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I went for the pet ox, and it performed like a pet ox.
Right.
What about mechanics? Let's talk a little bit about mechanics. Why don't we quick hits the mechanics real quick?
Sure.
And just sort of bang through them and just give like a sort of a quick impression. We've got some more specific questions for after it, but let's start with Heroic. What did you like Heroic? Give it. How about this? Thumbs up, thumbs down, and then like a quick anecdote about it.
Thumbs up. I was super skeptical when I saw the set just because I didn't see how it was going to fit into a normal limited deck, but they really pushed the set to make it work by just, adding way more combat tricks and way more auras. And it was good. Like, it was fun and very powerful.
Yeah, thumbs up for me as well. I thought it was cool. I thought that it was genius how they created Bestow to basically make the glue work for that. What about Monstrosity?
Oh, it's fun to play with big creatures, but putting really expensive stuff in your deck is usually a mistake. So Monstrous kind of gives you the best of both worlds.
Yeah, thumbs up big time for Monstrosity. I love simple mechanics.
Yeah.
But the thing that I really loved about Monstrous was that they let us do it at instant speed. I could easily see them say, activate this ability only as a sorcery or whatever, sorcery speed, right? But they didn't. They said, look, let's let them go nuts. You can do it during combat. You can threat of activation it. You can hold up counter magic if they don't play anything. Monstrous your thing on end step. I loved that.
Right. It also set up play situations that didn't actually feel that unfair because I could make blocks where I knew my opponent would monstrous, and then I could blow them out because they had to use all their mana to do it. So like normally you'd say like, oh, that's so unfair, like it's such a big advantage for the attacking player, but it actually in some ways could also work against them in certain situations too. And I thought that was fun.
I thought that was really great. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I attacked with a monstrous creature. They made what would be a trade, and I was like, okay. You know, because they had like 5 mana up or something. Yeah. And if like I go for monstrous and they kill my creature or bounce it, I'm just like so far behind. I just have to accept the trade. Mm-hmm. What's next? Bestow.
So as like a spiky player,
is this a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Oh, thumbs up for sure. Mm-hmm. Like this is probably my favorite, but I am normally very wary of playing auras. So having like a no downside aura just to get a play with, it was awesome because you know, for many, many years of my Magic playing career, auras were just always a mistake, always bad. And they've started to become good again, but especially Bestow is really fun to beef up one creature.
I think thumb sideways.
Really?
Yeah, I think that as a mechanic, it's fantastic. I think it's genius. Like, I think that the way that it works with Heroic is great, and I think that the way that it takes the pressure off of newer players to be able to just do what they want to do is great. But from my personal perspective, like, I don't love the Battlecruiser Magic. I think that a balance is a little bit better, and especially given that we didn't have any tools to really deal with big Bestow monsters in the first couple of sets, especially in the first set, I thought they got a little bit out of hand.
Yeah, I think...
I like risk. I like making people make a decision about whether they want to take some risk on or not. And with those, it was like, there's just no downside. You just run it out there.
But I want to play with auras too, Marshall.
Yeah, I don't. I'm just... Scry?
Scry, I was glad to have it back. Man, that Scry added so much skill to actually playing the games, you know, in a non-obtrusive way, but like really fun. I was glad it was in the set.
Yeah, big thumbs up for Scry for me too. I thought that they put it in reasonable amounts where it let games get smoothed out, but didn't throw the advantage so hard to the skilled players where it's just like, you know, they're like, if there's a set where they get to semi-scry every turn, it can get out of hand, right? Where you just see the worst players just falling further and further behind because there's so many more important decisions introduced, and the good players are generally going to answer those decisions better, that you can easily overdo it and kind of make it super lopsided. But limited is rough enough where like you have mana screw, you have color issues and stuff, and Scry helps across the board. People just play more Magic, and I love that. It's just they got to be careful, and I felt like they got the balance really good on this. Yeah.
The other thing is I thought they did a good job making it mostly Scry 1s, whereas before it was like Scry cards were more rare, but you got like Scry 2 and Scry 3, which was like warping. But Scry 1, it just is like a nice little bonus. You know, half the time it doesn't even do anything, but half the time it gets rid of a land or whatever. Yeah, big thumbs up for me.
I like it too. Devotion, which was really weird because the original incarnation of Devotion was Chroma. And like Chroma was like a complete mess. Like Chroma was not really that interesting. It just didn't come up that often. Like Devotion was actually a thing you could really draft around and actually make interesting decisions around. I liked it. I thought Devotion was pretty cool, and I was skeptical when it came back, but I would happily play with it again. Thumbs up. What's next? Inspired.
This is my first thumbs down. Okay. I just thought it wasn't that interesting. Usually it's just like, oh, the correct way is just attack with things that have inspired. I was going to do that anyways. It didn't really make the game more interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm thumbs down on Inspired as well for similar reasons. I felt like I was really excited by the idea of what it could do, and I really liked the twist of being able to tap the creatures without attacking. It didn't happen enough.
Right.
I just felt like those decks weren't there. I never faced them. I didn't play them myself. I didn't feel incentivized to do so. They had to nerf the good ones so much that they just sort of became into this no man's land, you know, like where you have to take a card that costs 5 mana, you know, now just because it has this inspired ability and make it a 2/2 that's hard to get in with. I felt like finding the balance was a little bit too rough. And then, like you said, for like the Tromper and stuff like that, you were just going to attack with that anyway. Like right. It's a cool card. It creates a neat tension, but I had higher hopes for Inspired.
Yeah. How about Tribute?
Tribute, you know, I was hoping that the decisions, I'll say thumb sideways on Tribute. Like, I think I was hoping the decisions would come up more often. where it was a harder decision or there was more to it, but it was almost always obvious. Like the only one, maybe I'm being a little too over the top, but one that I really thought was Farragax Giant, what really made people think a lot. But like Siren of the Fanged Coast, it might as well have just said air elemental. Like
right.
you just never got to steal. Like I did a grand total of one time ever got to steal something, and that was during the pre-release where the guy's like, wait, what does that do? And I'm like, okay, I'm like, you can take it back. He's like, no, it's cool. I'm like, all right, I'll take your 2-1 or whatever. But it was like, I felt like while the potential for interesting decisions was there, they almost always weren't interesting. It was almost always just like, okay, like it was so straightforward that I was hoping it would be a little deeper.
Yeah, I think that Magic naturally just has interesting decisions, and this feels like a mechanic that's very much forced. Like it's trying very hard to be like, "Oh, what if you had to make a decision when your opponent did stuff?" Like you always have to make decisions. Magic's all about decisions. It reminds me of like my friend in this. We make our own Magic card sometimes, and he's like, "Oh, what if you had a bluff card where they have to guess if a certain card is in your hand or not?" Like that's just Magic.
Yeah,
like
that's called the attack step.
Yeah, you don't have to force it. That's just how the game naturally plays out. So I actually thought Tribute actually created less interesting gameplay than some of these other mechanics like Monstrous and Bestow and Scry just do more effortlessly.
Right.
So thumbs down.
Okay.
The last one, Constellation.
Big thumbs up for this one. Simplicity is fantastic. I love, the idea of enchantment fall, right? Just you play an enchantment, you get something. And I love the fact that it's generally built into the card itself. So you get something for playing the card, and then it rewards you for playing more. And I just think that's so elegant, right? Because like a lot of them, you're just like, I'm just going to get my trigger off of this, and then I'm kind of done with it. Or maybe incidentally, I'll have some random enchantment. And then a lot of them are like, no, like we're building as many enchantments into this deck as we can, and it's going to be a deck that's built around this mechanic. And I just think that, like, when you have that kind of elegance and flexibility, you have a winner.
Yeah, this is like, it's the Greek block, but it's also just the enchantment block. And I kind of thought that they would just have more stuff that's like enchantments matter. And this was like the only really one that actually really counted the number of enchantments you had in your deck. Basically would make you want to play tons of enchantments. And I think that they saved it for the last set. Maybe they just thought it was too easy or whatever. Not that interesting of a design. But in the draft portion, I thought was very fun to be like, oh, but that card's an enchantment. That makes me want it more. And just like having decisions like that where you have like, your multiple forces pulling at you. I really enjoy that part, especially in the draft portion. So
yeah, I think the reason why they did is actually for constructed.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think that like they maybe were a little concerned about like just putting the Constellation deck out there right off the bat, having it be fantastic, and making like a they call it like a block monster or whatever, where it's like they can never get rid of this stupid deck.
Right.
So I think they hedged a little bit and put it in later. Maybe that's just a guess.
Where especially like mechanics like that, it could be just so obvious how to build your deck that everyone has the exact same deck, and if they're pushing it to be powerful, it just makes the format not interesting.
Right. Yeah. All right. So what would be the mechanic that you would be most excited for it to return to a limited format in the future?
I said Bestow. I just thought that Bestow played out great, and I always like when mechanics function different early in the game and late in the game. Because I just love cards that do that. I think it's interesting, but also you can be like, oh, it's like kind of in that middle area, in the gray area. Do I save it or do I cast it? I love cards that do that. So I thought Bestow was really interesting, and it's like you can always just play these things as a creature, and I love creatures.
Yeah, that flexibility is definitely enticing. I picked Inspired, but I want a better run at Inspired. I want it maybe to be something that gets a little more attention, or maybe figured out a few cards that work a little bit better, where they're not just one or the other, where they're super nerfed, or where they're cards you're just going to do that with anyway, and you just get a random bonus for. I kind of wanted it to be maybe a little more Inspired centric set or something like that. I liked it, so I want to see it again. I just didn't like how it played out necessarily in this block, and I'm hoping that there's still something there.
All right.
Another one, honorable mention, by the way, is Monstrosity. Like, I just think that's such a simple one, and I think they could just throw that into, like, they could core set that one, no problem. It's easy to understand. It's cool, and it's elegant, too.
Yeah, and monstrosity is not a thing you need to put on a whole bunch of cards. It's never going to be like the central theme of the set.
Yeah.
But it can just make any set a little bit more fun.
Exactly. And I it's not flashy, but it's cool.
Yeah, exactly. So what mistake did they make when they were doing this block? Did you see anything that just made you go, I wish they did something a little bit different?
Yes. The ordeal cycle.
This is the most common complaint I think people have had about this set.
I hated these cards. Like, I hated that they were not really interactive. Out of all of Theros block, and then even a lot of Born of the Gods, we finally got some answers a little later, but there just wasn't enough ways to interact with the turn 1 guy or turn 2 guy, turn 3 or turn 2 ordeal. You just felt helpless, and you were just going to take 9 or 12 damage and still maybe not be able to block the thing. I thought it warped the entire format around it and pushed up other cards that we'll talk about in a little bit. You know, cards like Freak is Chosen, Sedge Scorpion all of a sudden became like these kind of powerhouses. Bounce spells all of a sudden became great, where traditionally they were playable but not amazing. And you needed these things because if they got the ordeal start on you and you didn't have some way to interact, you were dying. And normally in an aggressive deck, the way to interact is to play stuff in those early turns, right? We've seen sets recently where the emphasis is shifted to 2 drops and where 6 and 7 drops fall out of favor. And that's because there's really good aggressive decks around. This set, even if you played a 2-drop, you still were going to get ran over by this stupid ordeals. And there still wasn't enough cheap, flexible answers to get rid of them. And I really thought it just was a terrible play experience when it happened. And I think this reflects that high variance thing that I was talking about earlier, where if you look at the numbers as a whole, you can be like, well, the ordeals are fine because sometimes they just win you the game. But if you're behind, they don't do anything because you can't block. So they balance out. Right. And all I see are just 2 bad gameplay experiences evening out, as opposed to a card, say a 2-2 for 2 or a 2-3 for 3 that is like, well, if you're ahead there, it's pretty good because it's going to beat down. And if you're behind, you can block. And those do even out like in sort of an elegant way. These are like all or nothing. It's like, it's either the worst card possible or it's the best thing you could be doing on this turn. And I don't like cards that have that big of a swing to it, right? I don't mind some variance ending bombs where it's like, this game needs to end here, 7-drop, right? I have a Born Overlord. When I see that, I don't think like, oh, this is such a swingy card. It's either terrible because you lose early or you get it late. Like, I just think, look, the game needs to end, and that person should get a reward for being alive and having 7 mana on the battlefield. But when it comes to these ordeals, I'm just like, okay, I'm dead because I'm getting ran over and I have an ordeal in my hand, or I, play my random 1-drop, put an ordeal on it, and you're just dead. And there's just so few ways you can interact, and it just always bugged me.
I see. I think I stole tons of equity from people that liked ordeals by just super highly picking all the cards that punish them.
Me too.
Yeah,
I did too, and that's why I said it was warping. Like I went with it. I'm like, okay, Sedge Scorpion, second pick, get in the deck. Here we go. And I was fine with it. I rarely lost to the ordeal deck. Like, this isn't as much a gripe about me because I made major adjustments. It's because I had to, and I don't mind making some adjustments, but like, I don't really love a format that skews that heavily towards Sedge Scorpion. Like, that's not the most fun thing that I can think of to do in a game of limited Magic.
Yeah. When you have to draft like kind of janky answers super highly because of that card, that might not be a good thing.
What about you?
So I totally agree with most of your criticisms, although like I don't really think that they were too powerful. But yeah, like you said, for me, I thought the biggest mistake was having Dawnbringer Charioteers be the pre-release promo.
Yeah, that was bad.
That card is absurd.
Yeah, that card is insane.
And just being like, oh, if you're playing white, you just automatically get this absurd bomb, and everyone else is just getting a card that's like, it's pretty good, I guess. But
or cost 7 or whatever.
Yeah. It was like not even close. Which promo was better? So either they need to like rethink how they do these color boxes at the pre-release, or they need to like specifically print a card in each color that they can make the promo. Because I think they kind of got to the point where they had to select the promos, and they're like, uh-oh. The only white creature is either this or like the Aegis of the Legion. The Aegis of the Legion or whatever doesn't make any sense at all. So we're going to make Charioteers be the promo, but it was just too good.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that like we have to be reasonable, right? Like that was for one weekend or whatever, and ultimately it's kind of like shrug, right? Like, what are you going to do? Because for me, it's a small set, right? And so they have a very limited, I mean, how many how many white rares are there in a small set? You know, there's like 7 or 4, whatever. There's not that many, right?
Right.
And so, like, you wouldn't want them to skew the whole set just for the pre-release, right? That would like, if they want to have a card like Dawnbringer Charioteers, it should be in there, and it shouldn't cost 5 or 6 just because, like, well, we don't want everybody at the pre-release to have this. But, you know, they obviously didn't have another choice that made sense. But I will say that, yeah, this one felt particularly egregious just because it was so much better than everything else at that pre-release.
Yeah, I just think they need to rethink something. And what that is, I don't know. But just it kind of created the perfect storm. But if they don't rethink it, it could happen again and just be annoying. You know, for some people, the pre-release is the only tournament they play in. So
that is true. That's a good point.
You know, I wouldn't want their experience to be, you know, any less important than ours who play, you know, 50 drafts of each set.
All right. What about the card that grew on you the most from Journey to Nyx?
For me, it was the Johnny's Presence. You know, I just thought, oh, this is a pretty good combat trick too. Like, this is just the best common combat trick in the set, and it's not even close. Like, or in the block, it was just an insane combat trick.
Really good. Yeah, that card grew on me a lot. Mine was Pin to the Earth. I had others though, like Flurry of Horns kept going up for me. There was others, but Pin to the Earth was one that I was like, I'm not really sure what this wants to do, but I ended up really liking it. Like, I ended up being like, no, this is approximate removal pretty well. The other one was Cast into Darkness, right? Like, that was one that I didn't really grasp until having played with it against it a bunch. And then I was like, no, this card's like very close to pacifism. It really does approximate a pacifism quite nicely. Like, not against their big bomb, but, you know, against a lot of stuff, it does a really good impression. And so that one moved up a lot for me too.
Yeah, for both of those cards, it's a huge deal that they cost 2 and not 3. Like, that makes all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world. You know, just get that 2-drop down, you know, if you need to on turn 2. But other than late in the game, you can actually cast 2 spells in a turn. That was huge.
Yep.
For the block, for both of us, it was definitely Hopeful Eidolon.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, that was the card that we kind of really poo-pooed and turned out to be very powerful.
Right.
But besides that, I think for me, Glimpse the Sun God, just not just good if you're just super hardcore aggro, because you can target all your heroes with it. That's actually just incredibly powerful. And the Scry, like, it's not just the game over glimpse or the game over falter effect. You can actually use this in the middle of the game just for a little bit of value and actually get a lot of benefit out of it.
And try to set up future turns. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that card was good too.
Yeah, and like pretty much no matter what type of your deck you're playing, Glimpse would be worth running.
Mine for block was Scholar of Athreos.
Yeah. It looks innocuous, but it just is a win condition.
It's just a straight up win con. If you want to make the game go long, it gives you inevitability. It blocks well. It digs you out. I mean, there's definitely a burnout potential in this set. You know, I think we've all lost to somebody, you know, getting us low and then drawing a Bolt of Keranos or a Lightning Strike and finishing us off. And this card lets you buffer yourself in those tweener turns where you've stabilized, but you're still at low life, and you can dump your mana into it. I like that a lot. That card just went up and up and up for me. At some point, I thought it was one of the best commons in Theros, you know, assuming that you could actually put the mana into it. Another card that went up for me was a Crow and Horse. I just started calling it Elspeth. And it kind of just kept going up for me because I started drafting decks that were better and better against it. Like, for example, Scholar of Athreos decks, you know, where you're just like building up all these tokens to block with and gain advantage. And you've got stuff to do with your mana. You don't have any onus to start, you know, bashing with 5-power creatures or something where they can just block with the horse. I really like Scholar. I really like the horse and Scholar.
It's like the worst feeling in the world when they've gotten like 3 or 4 tokens out of it already, and you have like a sip of Hemlock in your hand. You're like, do I have to kill this stupid horse and like do 2 damage to myself in the process?
Yes.
It feels so bad.
Also, don't forget your trigger because it's yours now.
Right. Yeah.
Such a dagger card.
All right. So
what's next?
Which card didn't turn out to be as good as you thought it would?
Satyr Hoplite.
Really?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a premium common, and it ended up being playable in the right deck, but not amazing.
I think that's fair, you know, because you kind of compare it to like Favored Hoplite, which was pretty cool.
Which was very good.
Yeah, and like I wouldn't say Satyr Hoplite turned out to be anywhere near as good as Favored Hoplite used to be.
I got a 14th pick Satyr Hoplite once.
Yeah,
you just don't see that for the other good cards.
Yeah, for me, very similarly, blood crazed Hoplite. And I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but just all of the heroes just got a little bit worse. And that made the new heroes just not as exciting as the old ones used to be.
That's right. What about for the block?
For me, Pinnacle of Rage.
Oh, the do 3 to 2 different things?
Yeah, it's so close to a card that used to be just like insane. Like Jagged Lightning in Urza's block, cost 5 mana, did this exact thing, I think. Was just like one of the best cards you could ever hope for. And just adding that 6th mana onto it, and also just the way that Theros is, where creatures gets to get so big that damage has a hard time killing them. It just added up to be like a card. It's like Pinnacle of Rage is like not even a must play. Like it's very, very cuttable. In fact, I probably more often than not had it in my sideboard. It actually wasn't that good at all.
Totally.
So for a card that I thought was going to be pretty exciting, I was very disappointed with.
Yeah, one for me was Centaur Battlemaster. That was our preview card from Theros. And I mean, it was fine. It ended up being fine, but I kind of thought that it might put more pressure on, but it needed a little more help than I thought. I still haven't really figured why it's not amazing. Maybe just this competition. And the other one that I thought was better and had to start moving down my pick order was Flitterstep Eidolon. Still a good card. Like I don't have any issue with it, but it turns out when you bookend a card that far where you're like a 1-drop or a 6 or whatever, it gets pretty rough to find a happy medium for that. Mm-hmm. And, because as a 1-drop, it just doesn't do quite enough. And as a 6 or whatever for Bestow, it's maybe a little too expensive for what you get.
I think the thing that killed both of those cards is they just don't block well. And Theros turned out to be a pretty aggressive block. Not hyper aggressive, maybe probably actually middle of the road for modern design sensibilities. But aggro decks were powerful and plentiful, and if you couldn't defend yourself, you didn't have time to set up these crazy plays.
Exactly. What subset of cards most overperform for you in this block?
Oh, Death Touch, without a doubt.
For sure. Yeah, that's what I have too.
Yeah, because they nerfed removal, and they made it really easy to make giant creatures. So if I can't Doomblade your creature, the next best thing I can do is get the green Doomblade, Sedge Scorpion.
Yeah, and did you mean they nerf combat tricks? You said they nerf removal. What did you mean?
They nerfed removal, so they made it really hard to kill that big creature.
Oh, you mean Wizards nerfed the removal?
Exactly.
I thought you meant the Scorpion.
No. Yeah, so just like saying, like, before we used to get Doomblade, now we get Sip of Hemlock. We used to get, I don't know, Lightning Bolt. Now we got, Rage of Perforos or whatever. They're just way worse than they used to be. It's just hard to kill those giant creatures with removal spells.
Totally.
You had to find a sideways way to do it, and Death Touch was that way.
Yeah, the other one that I noted here was were bounce spells. Again, it's easy to forget, that like bounce spells are not premium in normal sets. They're fine. They'll often make the cut in people's decks, but they're not high picks. And I first picked Voyage's End a bunch of times.
Oh yeah.
Griptide basically never made it. It was always in my main deck. Mm-hmm. And Griptide gets you a card back, so it's a little different. But I mean, Voyage's End is a glorified unsummon. Right? And unsummon is not a first pick. It's just not. It's fine, and you can usually I love them personally, but they're just they go a lot later than that in like core sets and other types of sets. But this set with all the Bestow running around where you could break it up and make the creature more manageable, with the Ordeal cycle floating around, with the monstrous creatures being, dumping huge amounts of mana into them, all of a sudden bounce was back, baby. And
right.
I thought that was an overperformer.
Oh, for sure. This is one of my favorite ones. Which card was the most begrudgingly playable?
I can't do this.
Why?
Fine. Necrobite.
Fine. See, I don't think Necrobite is begrudgingly playable. I think it's begrudgingly awesome. It's begrudgingly a complete blowout every time.
So I have to now begrudgingly tell you that I am holding in my hand a Necrobite that somebody made me sign at a GP and then handed it to me and said, "You have to give this to Brian."
Yes.
So
you know how many 3-for-1s I got with Necrobites? A bunch.
Yeah, no, that is sweet. And like that's why I put it on the list. It's just that people didn't play around it enough. There weren't as many tools as normal to punish a 3-mana combat trick. And man, some people just walked into it and you're just like, wow, like this card has one of the biggest upsides. I'm obviously still not high on it. I had it in the D+ range or whatever. I have it C- or something like that, but it's the upside is definitely there. Like when people try to block in a big way, on one of your key threats, they can get destroyed with Necrobite. And then it gives you a little bit more flexibility too, just like, oh, they use removal, you can save your guy.
Yeah. It also, because there's so many giant growths, and people are like, I don't want to lose the giant growth. So if I want to kill the creature, I need to block with everything. Oh, Necrobite is the perfect foil to the people that are blocking with everything. It's so good. Oh, when they start to block with that second creature, and then that third creature, and then that fourth creature, you're just like don't breathe, don't move, just like keep going. Oh, it's so fun. Love that card.
Yeah.
For me, the answer is not Rotted Hulk, because Rotted Hulk actually turned out to be eminently playable.
It was
not begrudgingly at all.
Yeah.
Rotted Hulk was actually pretty sweet. So for me, I think it was Aspect of Gorgon. And it's not like I thought Aspect of Gorgon was like a great card, but every now and then you play it.
You're just like, fine.
Yeah. It creates a combo with Forgeborn Oreads, where you put it on that thing and it deals the 1 damage, and now it has Death Touch, so it kills it.
Oh my god, I didn't think about that.
Boom!
Yuck.
Yeah, pretty sweet.
That's sweet.
Which subset of cards most underperformed? So we talked about the subset of cards that overperformed, Death Touch and Bounce. What in this block was way worse than usual?
The removal. I thought that the sorcery speed or the really expensive removal was really clunky. A lot of it cared about the creature's power and toughness instead of just saying destroy, like Lash of the Whip or Rage of Perforos. And it was like you had some real junkers in there where we really didn't have anywhere else to run but right into the Sip of Hemlock camp, right? And Sip of Hemlock is not premium removal by normal limited standards. It's just what we had to work with here. So for my money, the underperformers was a removal. But we knew that. Like we correctly assessed that coming into the format and had to make adjustments based on it. But yeah, they nerfed the removal real hard for this one.
Yeah, especially the black ones. Way to the Underworld, Nyx Infusion, Lash of the Whip. These cards were bad.
Yeah.
For me, I thought it was just 6 and 7 drops. Just anything that even was like kind of expensive, and not that you couldn't get to 6 or 7 mana, just that you had monsters to do and you had Bestow to do. You had other stuff to do with that mana, and sure, you could cast that giant thing, but why? Why not just draft more of these monsters and Bestows instead?
Right, because you can cast those on turn 3 or turn 4 in a pinch, where the 6 and 7 drops just rot in your hand until you get there.
And they printed a lot of good ones.
They did.
I just ended up not wanting any of them.
Yeah. Also, the presence of the aggressive decks in the format definitely helped push those further back on the burner too.
Yeah. So what about this block would you change? Would there be any like one type of thing that you'd say, I wish they'd done that differently?
Well, I mean, going back to my biggest complaint about the block was the ordeal cycle. I would either just cut it out entirely or I'd weaken it significantly. I thought that the aggressive decks didn't need the power push from the ordeals. I thought they were just fine thanks to Bestow and infinite combat tricks. Every color had playable, reasonable combat tricks in this block. And I just felt like they didn't need the extra help from the ordeals, and I thought they should go.
Yeah, that's fair. For me, I wish they had pushed Black Devotion throughout the block a little bit more. It was like a huge theme in Triple Theros, and like even just introducing one set, Born of the Gods, really took a bite out of it. That new Marsh Mist Titan or whatever they got, just didn't pull its own weight. And then you get to Journey and you got nothing, and you just kind of felt like poor Grey Merchant just fell by the wayside.
Yeah, he got a little bailed on there after being kind of the king of the hill in Theros.
Yeah, it was the best common and ended up being like an also ran pretty much. I mean, it's still a good card, but you just didn't even really think about it while you were drafting.
All right. I love this next one, by the way.
Which card that you refuse to play beat you multiple times?
Yeah, just like you are not playing that thing, but it keeps beating you. For me, I had two different answers. The first was Boulder Fall / Spellheart Chimera deck.
In combination.
Yeah, I mean, just that type of build, right, where they're like doing stupid Boulder Fall stuff, or they're trying to get a Spellheart Chimera up to big numbers or whatever. I was just
How did you lose to that?
I actually lost to those two specific cards together. And I mean, the answer was he resolved Boulder Fall with a Spellheart Chimera out, and I died.
Yeah, if they cast Boulder Fall, it's usually bad for you.
Yeah. The other card was Sunbond. I died a horrible death to Sunbond in a match, and I lost to it one other time besides that, but it was only one game and I won the match. But yeah, no, I'm not never Sunbonded.
Yeah, for me, it was definitely Gift of Immortality.
Oh, that thing?
Just the do nothingest of do nothing, you know. But
Yeah, it
sometimes
really
like,
was.
it's just like I just wish that thing would die, and it won't die. It's just so annoying.
The appropriately named Gift of Immortality.
Yeah.
I never lost to that stupid card. People played it against me, and I just destroyed them every time.
I probably lost like 5 games to that card. It was like unreal. Like
That's awesome.
That stupid Phalanx leader. Like I just need to get it off the board, and now I can't. It's so annoying.
Yeah.
Ugh. Hate that question.
What unpopular card did work for you?
Flurry of Horns. Yeah. I think I don't like Flurry of Horns like never got popular, I don't think. And
No, it never did.
I cast that card like probably 10 times more than my opponents cast it against me. Like I love Flurry.
Yeah, I thought it was good too. Mine was Strength from the Fallen. Like it's just not a popular archetype, but I definitely, with the help of BDM, found a nice niche for it when it worked. I went a little too deep a couple times, and that didn't work out. But when I balanced things out a bit and just had like one of them floating around for value, I had +10/+10 on a creature a couple of times and was able to do it twice, like in the same turn. Like play strength, play, whatever, and just boom, hit you for 15 or 20 or whatever. And that can happen. It's not as hard as it seems if you build around it properly. Like the key is to not go all in, even though it's tempting. Like you don't necessarily want to have like all of the like commune with the gods and stuff. I mean, they're fine, but there's a lot of do nothings there. If you can balance it out, though, the card's quite strong.
You actually have to put creatures in your deck to make it work. So you kind of actually need to build a normal looking deck.
Yeah, the Satyr Wayfinder, that's your guy, because he gets pumped ++X in a big way. And having incidental bodies on the battlefield is what makes that card work.
Right. I actually love this question. So I had a bunch of answers for the block, but Minotaur Skullcleaver I think was my favorite because I don't think that card's even that great. But sometimes you would just have like kind of a bad draw, and your opponent would be like racing you, and then you're like Skullcleaver you. And they're like, okay, keep attacking. You're like, Skullcleaver you again. They're like, oh, I'm dead.
Yeah.
What happened?
That did happen a lot. He got through for 4 so often.
Yeah, I like that card. And then just a couple of random ones. Nylea's Presence, that was always my pet card. Necrobite, we talked about that before. And for me, Feral Invocation I thought was just underrated all the time because everybody loved those like 2 mana +2/+2 things. But Feral Invocation lasts. You blow them out, and then it stays in play. The creature is huge now.
Right.
Feral Invocation is a really good combat trick. I thought it was, a really good one. I don't know.
I thought
liked
that was strange, too, that everybody... Because, I mean, the difference between 2 and 3 mana is a big deal, but keeping the +2/+2 is a huge deal.
Yeah, people seem to think that Savage Surge versus Feral Invocation was a question. I thought it was, like, not close.
All right. For me, Mnemonic Wall.
You're the worst kind of person.
I did some grinding with that thing for sure. Cetessan Battle Priest is really unpopular, and I actually didn't like it very much until I started playing our black-white sort of control-y deck. And then that thing actually becomes decent because you need to do something early and turn to, playing that thing as a reasonable blocker. Not exciting, but reasonable. And then you could like bestow that up, gain a couple of life back, and make just a ground-pounding blocker that was just really tough to deal with. And you pick them up as late as you wanted them. Like you never had to actually dedicate real picks to them. But if you needed to have 2s, I thought that card was fine.
Yeah, people made the mistake of trying to put that in aggressive decks because like, oh, I'm an aggressive heroic deck. Like, no, that's not a good target. That's a defensive card because it comes down and starts blocking on turn 2. That's great.
Exactly. And I think that, it's hard to blame them, and it's just that they didn't take it to the next step, because if I would have, like, let's say we just did the set review and I walk up to you, and I'm like, here's the deal. Heroic, white, 2-drop. Boom. Like, put it in my aggressive deck. But yeah, this thing just didn't want to be in there. The other one I liked was Divination. I just felt like Divination had a nice slot where you could run one. You could put it off till late in the game. Because you always had stuff to do with your mana, and then when you needed to, fire off Divination and go, and those went quite late. Like they just, I'd like to have 1 or 2 of those in my blue decks, even in some of the aggressive decks, and I think people just overlooked it a little bit.
Okay, so that question was basically which cards were other people underrating? Which cards were underrated by everyone, including you?
Oh, this is an interesting one. Well, what did you have for it?
I put Market Festival.
Oh, yeah?
Because... who didn't Owen draft a Market Festival deck?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. I drafted a Market Festival deck one time. I got forced out of my deck. I had no choice. I drafted like 3 super late Market Festivals, and all of a sudden I was like, well, what if I just kind of like did it? and it was good. Like, it was actually pretty sweet, and I just never did it again. But I think Market Festival could be a thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly powerful, right? Like, it's rawly powerful. It's just, can you harness that power? And sometimes you could. I actually had Rotted Hulk.
Yeah.
You know,
definitely.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I didn't underrate it as much, and I don't think it was amazing, but in the slowdown decks, that thing is a stop sign. It's just like, you shall not pass. It is huge. It's a really epically good blocker, and I think it never really got its due in that role.
Yeah, it also blocks bears like crazy, because even if they have the pump spell, their creature can't kill Rotted Hulk.
Right.
So in that vein, I had Pharaoh's Band Centaurs.
For the block?
This is a card that, like, I almost never was played against me, but almost every time it was cast, it was pretty good. Like,
I agree 100%. The problem, of course, is that there's a lot of competition at 5-drop and green.
Right.
Yeah, so that's why you didn't see it. But man, a 3/7 is just impossible. Impossible to attack through. There's never been attacked through in the history of Magic the Gathering. So it's a unique power and toughness in a lot of ways. I don't know if that's literally true, but it's super. You don't see it often, and it's super tough to attack through. Mm-hmm. I had Eye Gouge or Spark Jolt. Is that what it's called?
The red Eye Gouge. I see.
Yes, I forgot what it was called, so that's what I put. But you know, for the full block, I thought those came around a lot better. I wrote about it in an article, and I made it just a list off the top of my head of the stuff that it killed, and it is a very impressive list. You know, starting off with Elfmer and going on down, it kills. You know, I mean, you can think about it, and it bangs out a ton of really annoying stuff, like the Sedge Scorpion and the Farika's Chosen. It kills Vaporkin, you know, and the list goes on. There's even a lot of 3-drops that it kills too, like Seder Nick Smith and like the Linebreaker, and it just, you will often get a real card out of those things, and you get the random Eye Gouge equity of killing a Cyclops occasionally, which I never got to do either, sadly.
Yeah, I was always really eager to bring them out of my board, and maybe I should have been main decking them slightly more often too. Yeah,
I think in full block, I think that it got there in full block where you could put one of those in your main deck.
All right, which card just put a smile on your face when you had it in play? It just made you feel good about playing Magic. While you controlled it.
So from Journey to Nyx, it was Sigiled Starfish. Man, I was just like, everything's going to be okay. Like, I'm not going to get mana screwed. I'm going to make decisions. I'm going to play Magic, or at least feel like I'm playing Magic. I'm going to block a couple times. Like, I love that card.
Yeah, people who have looters in play think that they're so smart, and it's like, yeah, you get to see twice as many cards as I do. It's real easy, you know. Like, good job, buddy.
Yeah, that's how I felt.
And I guess maybe my answer is actually very similar to that, but mine was Nyx Weaver.
Oh, yeah.
Nyx Weaver just like sits around, and you're like, there's a Silence Believer somewhere in my deck, and I'm going to get it.
I'll either draw it off the top, or it's going to get milled.
Yeah. So it just felt good. It felt great. You could just get your bomb very consistently.
And really cool, too, is that it did an actively great job of making sure that it was around for a while. A super efficient blocker, a 2/3 reach for only 3 mana, meant that there just wasn't that many starts that could pound through it. They needed to add something to their 2-drop to get it through.
It was just a really impactful card. You felt like you were playing a very different version of Magic than your opponent when you had that card in play.
Right. What about for the block?
I had Reaper of the Wilds.
Oh, you loved having that, huh?
I know, very, very creative.
Out on a limb, yeah.
But it's like, this thing is almost impossible to kill. It can just bash like really well, and if it can't, it sits around and has a very useful ability to make sure that I draw spells forever.
There's good squirm factor too, because like even if your opponent has a couple of creatures that they want to double block with, which will kill it, they know they're going to lose their 2 creatures, and you just get to smile and be like, yeah, 2 for 1, thank you.
I think Reaper of the Wilds asks the least of you of like any card in the set. It's just like, this card's going to perform no matter what.
Yeah, and at 4 mana too. The one I had, Shelly. I just loved it. Anytime I had that card in play, I was happy. It just didn't matter if it was bestowed, if it was blocking, if it was attacking. I just loved playing that card. I think Shelly's my favorite card from the whole block.
Yeah, Thassa's Emissary, that's our girl.
Yeah.
Man, especially you connect once, now you get the bounce spells and you get the removal spells or the other combat tricks or whatever you need to keep it going. And it's just like you connect once with Shelly, and that's game.
Yep, and it's just, again, the squirm factor is super high. I mean, you just turn it sideways into like 2 of their bears, and they're like, great. Because you just always have the combat trick. I don't care what other color you are. Like, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You can literally be any of the other colors, and you've always got it. You've got a Boon of Erebos if you're black. It's like it doesn't matter.
I mean, what are you going to do? Not block?
Right. What are you going to do? And then not block and let me start drawing the combat tricks on block. It's just stupid. Yeah. Shelley was the best.
Yeah. Forces the action.
Exactly. Oh, this is a big one.
Yeah. This is the iconic question of the set review, I believe.
I think it is too. This is winner for the biggest groan test of the set.
Just the card that every time your opponent played it, you just wished you weren't sitting there anymore. You wished you were doing something else, taking a pleasant walk in the sun, reading a book, whatever. You're just like, I wish I wasn't playing Magic right now.
Clipping your toenails, organizing your card collection, anything but
taking out the garbage. Yeah, anything.
So what is it for you?
In Journey to the Nyx, Dictate of Heliod.
Such a beating.
So all my creatures just died, and all your creatures are big, and all future creatures you draw are big. Like, are we done? Like,
yeah,
I think we're done. It's like, I mean, I'll draw my next 2 cards, but I know it's hopeless. I have no chance of winning anymore. Ugh.
I know, and the worst part, of course, is that you can do it. They can do it at instant speed, so you can even set up a block where you're like, okay, I've played around 2 combat tricks and a Johnny's Presence. We're okay here. Block. And they're like this. And you're like, oh, right, never mind. Game 2.
It's almost impossible to misplay Dictate of Heliod. Like, how can you screw it up? You just play it, start attacking, and you're going to win.
Exactly. So for me, it was a combo. But number 1 for me, it was Doomwake Giant. Because you can't attack into it because it's huge. It usually kills like maybe one of your things. And then you have to sit there and wait. Because they are going to cast more enchantments and you are going to lose your creatures. And it's just like, no. The other one I had was Silence of the Believers. And that one's just simple. And the reason, like, normally I wouldn't put just like a straightforward removal spell on a thing like this. Because, of course, you're going to groan when they kill your thing. But why does it deserve a spot on here? And the reason is because we didn't have access to a tool like this for the whole block. And it's just impossible to keep remembering that it's there because it's a rare. And so when they do, you're just like, oh, I put my thing on this and then another bestow on that and let's ordeal it up. And then they're just like Silence of Believers. And you're like, no, like that is not fair. Like we all made an agreement here on Theros that we would get big, huge creatures and you wouldn't do that. And your opponent's like, does it resolve? And you're just like, this isn't right. And then you exile all your creatures and lose.
Yeah, I mean, could we just very much established that when your thing with bestows on it dies, the bestows come into play?
That's how it's supposed to work.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not taking any risk by going all in on one creature, and then silence happens, and that's not fair.
That's
can't
not
do that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Now, what about for the block? What'd you have?
This for me is Whelming Wave.
Whelming Wave.
And not because Whelming Wave is the best card. It's just that, okay, we're playing this game now. You're going to Mnemonic Wall, your Whelming Wave, and Whelming Wave again. And it's like, this is really what we're going to do. We're going to sit there for 15 freaking turns, recasting our creatures turn after turn after turn. That's so dumb. Like, why are you making me do this? And, like, even if I had ways to kill them, and even if I would win, I'm like, why are you making me do this? You're just delaying it. It's so annoying. I hated playing against people that had Whelming Wave in their deck. It's so annoying.
That's awesome. So the one I picked was actually Shipbreaker Kraken. And the reason I picked it is because it stares at you. Like, they play it and you're like, oh, great. And they always draw a land, no matter what. They're always going to hit the land they need. And you can't beat it once they monsters it. And you have to just sit there because it's also huge, so you can't really attack into it. And they always get the land they need to monstrous it and just kill you with it. And every single time I'm just like, he's obviously going to draw the land. Yep, there's the land. Here we go. Right, all 4 of my things are gone. You hit me for 100. I have 1 draw step to draw a chump blocker. But your things are just locked down. It's not even a 1-turn effect. It's just they're just locked, under the flood of the Shipbreaker Kraken. So I picked it as big as Groan Test just because you have to stare at it as it slowly ticks up to your inevitable demise.
Yeah, I hate those situations where you're like, okay, if they don't have the 8th land, but they have like 1 card in their hand, and of course they have a draw step, and you're just like, I'm holding out hope here, but man, the hope is like is like pretty unlikely.
Yeah, and they always take the extra card, shuffle it with the 1 other card, play their land for the turn. And you're like, okay, yeah. The honorable mention for me for biggest Groan Test is actually Shelley. It's when they bestow Shelly, right?
Oh, God.
Or like okay, I'm going to change it. It's a combination of Shelly and Nimbus Naiad. Any of those two together is like, oh God, right? Like, sure, take 5, you draw a card. Like, how could it be any worse than that, right? Like, there's just nothing worse in Magic than watching your opponent gleefully get another draw step while also just straight up killing you, right? Like, we're used to Ophidian now in Vintage Masters, and that thing doesn't kill you if they get a card. It just doesn't even do the 1 damage it would have normally done. With Shelly and Nimbus Naiad, you take 5. Like, you're just getting your butt kicked, and they're also get the draw card.
All right. Were there any random cards in the set that you just thought that's a fun design? That's clever. Like, I'm glad they made that. You know, it's interesting or whatever. Like, anything like that?
Yeah, I thought King Makar was a really fun design and really cool. But God, I'm just like, what did you think? And maybe we'll soapbox for a minute just about the whole May ability thing, right? We already went over it, and I think people know. But Brian and I are both very disappointed that King Makar is not a must. We wanted him to be a true curse where he can't control his his ability, and he ends up turning himself or other things into golden guild tokens or whatever, but instead it's a May ability. So even on that last attack, your opponent doesn't really have the ability to play around it, and he can just be like, nah, I just won't do it. I thought it was really cool design that didn't quite get there.
I have the checkmate argument on King Makar not being a May, and it's this. Almost never in Magic history can you make a card more flavorful by removing text. It is almost impossible to do so.
Oh, interesting.
And the fact that you can do that on this card means that you should do that. It's just every other card to be more flavorful, you have to add stuff to it. This card, you remove something and make it more flavorful. That's so rare.
We need to get the design file on this card.
Yeah.
And we need to publicly shame the person who forgot to take this out.
Yeah, we do.
Maybe not.
So my random card, I thought was Polymorphous Rush. Like,
oh yeah, that's pretty cool.
You're probably never gonna see this card again, but it's just cool to like change your stuff around at instant speed. You know, I don't need to do it all the time, but every now and then, pretty cool.
You know, the other one I like is actually a lot like King Makar from the block. I thought Guild was really cool.
Yeah,
because like you turn their thing into gold and then you go spend it. It's
right.
Like, how cool is that? You turn their creature into a big chunk of gold, take it to the market, and trade it in for some mana. I just thought that was the coolest.
And it's a black mana fixer, which you don't get every day.
Yeah, that's true.
For me, I liked Scourge of Skolavale.
Oh yeah,
I just thought it created really fun gameplay where it's like, okay, I'm not really sure what to do. Oh, here's what I do: eat my thing, attack you for 12 or whatever.
Right, and I loved how it was a magnet. Like they had to kind of kill it, even though it was just like whatever, a 2/2 for 3 when you played it. But like if they went to go kill your other stuff, you're like, sure, eat it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel overpowered, but it feels so cool to have in play. Like you feel like you're very clever.
And I saw some huge Scourge of Skolavales made too, 12/12s and all that.
Oh yeah, I did that a bunch of times. What's the worst card in the set? And we're just going to go with Journey on this one.
Solidarity of Heroes.
That's
what I picked. That's the what's it called one? The Strive card. Oh, we forgot to mention Strive, by the way, in our thing.
Oh yeah, Strive is like kind of a forgettable mechanic, but it's a good one. That's fine.
Yeah, it's sideways thumb, right? It's like it's sure. Kicker variant again, so it's not something that haven't seen before. But I thought it was good. Like it fit fine, and it was an upped power level on a combat trick.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one was horrible. I never played it, never saw anybody play it against me, and I think it's like one of those ones that sort of makes you want to play it, but like it's a huge mistake. Like it's just a massive trap. This is the one that doubles the +1/+1 counters on your creatures.
Yeah, it's like the all-time highest setup cost.
Right, exactly. What about you?
I said Spite of Mogus.
Oh, so you just upped the setup cost barrier.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so it's a removal spell and it costs 1. Like, that's cool. Like, oh, but you can't cast it on turn 1. You can't cast it until like turn 12 because you have to have a whole bunch of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. So what's
also
the point?
Doesn't hit players.
Yeah. So what's the point of a card costing 1 if you can't even cast it until like really late in the game? And at that point, the mana cost is entirely irrelevant. There's just nothing to like about Spider Mogus. Gross card.
Yeah. Boo. Didn't like it either.
What card did you never figure out? Like what's this card here for?
Demolish?
Are you sure Demolish is in the block?
Yeah, it's in Theros.
Do not recall this
it was
all.
in Theros. I know it was in Theros. I looked it up, and what? Like, why are you here? Are you lost to demolish? Like, there's only a few artifacts, and not very many of them are very good. And paying 4 mana to blow up somebody's land is certainly not worth it.
That's bizarre.
I have no idea why that card even exists in the whole set. Although I did lose to it once, very embarrassingly.
For me, I took this a different way, but I said Reprisal, which is a card that I thought was really good. And like in my mind, it's good. And sometimes I would draft it and I'd be like, like I can't play it against this person. So I side it out or whatever. And it's like, well, if they have combat tricks, is a cheap way to foil them. Like, I don't know. I never really got a good handle on actually how good it is. And I think it's just because like against some decks, it's great. And against some decks, it's nothing. So is it a sideboard card? Can you pick it highly?
Funny. I actually never got a good feel for it either.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. Is it only a sideboard card or is it like, like a top 5 pick, like can you pick it in the top 5 cards in the pack? Like, I don't know. Like
it's probably like your 20th card or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I couldn't figure it out.
Oh God, this next one. What was your worst beat?
Oh, the worst thing that ever happened to me was my opponent had God Favored General, a card that I, despise. Just bad card. I don't like it at all. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just leave something back. So they play Skybind to remove my blocker from play. I'm like, okay, that's fine. I guess they get to use their God Favored General once. So they attack with God Favored General. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And then they untap next turn. God Favored General puts 2 tokens into play. Those tokens are enchantments.
What?
Why are those things enchantments?
Oh my God.
So then the enchantments trigger Skybind twice, remove my blockers again, and now I'm dead. I was like, really? Skybind, God Favored General, that killed me? That's what killed me? Like, this is so dumb.
That's awesome.
So, like, the thing that I always rail against is doing 2 bad things to do a great thing. Or to do just merely a good thing, and like this is like the A1 example of that. Like those cards are both do nothing.
Those are 2. Usually, what you say on the show is you don't want to do 2 mediocre things to make one good thing, and this is like 2 awful things.
Yeah. So, but I got blown out. Like I just got straight killed by that. So
I feel like you got savagely outplayed here.
It felt bad. I mean, I didn't realize what was happening to me until it was too late. But I mean, I don't know what I could have done anyways. It was just a trouncing.
That's super awesome. So my worst beat comes courtesy of Rashad Miller.
Oh,
and I've told this story on the podcast before, but I decided that I needed to cast Read the Bones, and I scry 2'd, and I put whatever both on the bottom or wherever I put them, and I went to draw my card, and all I heard was. And I'm like, what do you want? And I look up, I'm playing against Rashad, and he just points to a card on the table, and he had played Spirit of the Labyrinth, and I had forgotten. And I'm like, oh my God. And he starts laughing, and he's like, nice play. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, I'm never going to live this down. He's already coming up with stories to tell people to remind me about it. And I'm pretty far behind too. I mean, I needed to do that because I had lands in my hand. And as it turns out, I scried away a couple of lands too with it. So I got kind of lucky there. But then everything turned out great. I ended up in this one game. I ended up coming back from, at one point I was at 2 and he was at 160 something or whatever it was. And we both had Monstrous, our Acrone Colossi, and his had Lifelink, and mine was bigger and had First Strike, so they were just banging into each other, but he was gaining life for every time. And on top of that, I ultimated Kiora twice. I got to attack with a Vortex Elemental and activate its ability to make 2 different things block and still have enough mana to shuffle them away. I got to use a Bow of Nylea to put cards on the bottom of my library so that I didn't deck myself because I drew so many, and I ended up killing him with a slew of 9/9 Krakens and everything else. It was fantastic, but that is still my worst beat because once you hear Rashad go, you're like, no, he got me. Because he knows, like, he used to be like a level 3 judge. Like, he knows the rules. He's very attentive when it comes to that kind of stuff. So once he does that, he got you. Like, you got. And I got pretty bad there.
That is like the noobiest snapshot of like your Magic playing career, probably. If somebody, that was the only game that they had ever seen you play, first of all, like making that mistake, but then having the monstrous Colossus and the Kiora
Yes.
double ultimate and just like doing all that stuff.
Oh, dude, Owen walked up.
Yeah,
you know,
it's like
multiple turns later when we had these ridiculous board, and he's like, "Yeah," and then, and because I mean, the board state was absurd, right? Like it just was ridiculous.
No shame, you two. No shame.
Yeah, it was fun.
Okay, this is a new question. What card was your Brandy Alexander?
What the hell does that mean?
And by that I mean it always gets you into trouble. It's a Feist song.
Oh, I thought that was a drink or something.
Well, it is, but
Okay.
it's about that.
So I've mentioned this card a couple of times, but Strength from the Fallen, because like
Bad news.
it's not that good, right? I mean, it's pretty good, and I think it deserves a little more recognition that it's gotten, but it's also not a great card, and you can easily go too deep on it, and I've done that.
Yeah, for me it was Ferris Band War Chief, and like I love centaurs, but the thing that I love about centaurs is they don't ask anything of you. They just sit there and they attack and they block, and you can take them whenever. You can put them in whatever deck you want. But all of a sudden, I draft that War Chief, and then like I start having to be like, oh, I'm going deep with centaurs. But that's not what centaurs are great at. Centaurs are great at just being like the little, nondescript over here in the corner, just doing my job. Now all of a sudden, I'm warping my picks around Ferris Band War Chief and whatever, and like that's not how that's supposed to go. So Ferris Band War Chief, like just it was more trouble than it was worth really for me, and just messed up my drafts more than anything else.
Okay. What's
All right,
next?
What was a funky rare that you always hope to see?
Well, I didn't have anything super funky for this, but I always wanted to open a Farah, and I got to play a Farah once too, and she was awesome. And like, she's not really a build around me so much as just like a really powerful, fun card to have, especially if you're in blue white. But even if you're not, you can splash it or whatever. And I just was always hoping to get to play that card, and when I finally did, I thought it was really sweet.
For me, oh, of course. Hey, girl, it's Perplexing Chimera, the card that the best named card, like probably ever. It's just like that card is extremely confusing. Like
Most accurately named card.
yeah, because I'm a pretty good Magic player. I'm pretty smart, or whatever I like to think. And like half the time, I don't know what the hell's going on with this Chimera. It's like it's really whack. But even worse, my opponents were even more confused than me, so I could take advantage. So just. It was like a card that like rewarded like Kasparov levels of like grand mastery of the game that probably nobody has, but people would misplay against that card like crazy, and you could really take advantage.
I once had a conversation with Ben Stark about that card, and I was complaining about it because I was saying that I thought maybe it was a little bit too much for lower level players that are just like, they forget that it triggers, and then they give it away, and it's just like. It gets to be this weird thing that you have to constantly track all the time, and it has to factor into every decision that you make before you play like any spell out of your hand, basically. And that's a lot to track if you're still learning the rules of the game or trying to figure out basic strategy stuff. Mm-hmm. And he was like, "Are you crazy?" And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "I want every card to be a perplexing chimera." Like that, he just wants as much of that as he can get. So there you go.
Yeah, so it'll be like him versus Luis will be like the only two people in the world playing Magic after that happens.
Right.
Pretty much,
And they'll just be having a grand old time.
What card was most often the 24th card? Like the card that you're like, you draft it with the intention of playing it, and then you're just like, nah, it doesn't quite make the cut.
It was always Karametra's Acolyte for me. It's a good card. Like it can do some stuff, and I would always take it with the intention of putting it in the deck. I was like, yeah, this card's good. I need ramp anyway, whatever. But then it's just like, like it certainly is not one of the 2-drop accelerators, which is of course what I'd much prefer. And I always just ended up being like, nope, not quite. You're out.
Yeah, I think especially when it's competing with the other green 4-drops like Trompers and Lucercadas and just stuff like that. You're like all of a sudden you're like, yeah, this doesn't really look so good in comparison.
Yeah.
For me, it was Armament of Nyx.
Oh, the pseudo removal double strikey thing.
Yeah, and also Nyx Infusion for me, like kind of the same thing where it's like, oh, they're like. Master of no trades, jack of all trades, master of none. But it turned out like they really weren't that great at anything. It's like they weren't really that reliable of removal, and they weren't really that good to casting on creatures. And it kind of just felt like, they just felt expendable. Like I don't really need this effect. I could really live without it. So for me, it was like the first card on the chopping block.
Yeah, it was like that for me too. Here's a couple of good ones. What's the Brianiest card?
Oh, for me, with a doubt, Fellhide Petrifier.
That's your boy.
Yeah, it just comes down, attacks, it blocks. Like no matter what stage of the game you're in, it's great. Especially even like off the top in a huge board stall, because if you're playing Minotaurs, like it just all of a sudden opens up huge attacks. But just put your opponent in a bad spot no matter what. Just really liked it.
Yeah, that card was sweet. Yeah, I think the martialiest card was Shelly, because I love tempo plays and drawing a card when you attack. I mean, I don't know if I put it in the tempo category, but that's also something that I love. But Shelly let you do both, right? Because if you bestowed Shelly on something, it would often make that creature big enough to get a clean attack in, and you'd get to draw the card off of it. So even though it wasn't, like a Man of War type effect, which are really traditionally my favorite cards, there wasn't one of those around. So this was a nice substitute, though, where bestowing Shelly, that is just like the pinnacle for me, because you're so far ahead and you put your opponent in just a terrible spot, and you're drawing cards and getting further ahead, and you're taking away their life total. It's just like you're doing everything you want to at once. And that's what I love. Like I like an unsummon. I like a creature. I like a creature that is an unsummon, right? Like that's where I'm at, and this one's like, I like drawing cards. I like attacking. Boom. Let's do them both at the same time.
Yeah, it's like you get to be the blue mage, but also beat down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
God, I love doing that. I'm going to miss that.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. What is the card you still have to read every time it's cast against you?
Satyr Piper. I don't even know what it does. Like, I still couldn't tell you what the hell that card...
It either makes a creature have to be blocked, or it makes a creature block. One of those two.
It is definitely one of those two, and I don't know which one it is, and I will have to read that card forever. And the problem is that it's not a popular played card, so it comes up just often enough for me to forget in between times I see it what it does.
Yeah. For me, it's Crystalline Nautilus.
Yeah.
Because I kind of know what it is, but it doesn't feel like Grockable, where it's not like one idea I can hold in my head, because it's like, okay, if it's enchanting another creature and I target it, what dies? Does the creature die, or does the Nautilus die? Like, what happens here?
Right. And what's going to be left over?
Yeah, I just had to double check every single time that they cast Nautilus. So.
All right. So this is a big one as we are winding down here. What did you learn from this format, Brian?
For me, I learned just trust the people that are making the cards. Like if they put a mechanic in the set, they're not going to make it bad or unplayable or whatever. It's not like they're going to add a keyword that's just a trap. And I think when Heroic came out, I was like, I don't know. Like, I just don't see it. Like, how many combat tricks are usually in my deck? How many auras are usually in my deck? And the answer is, like, maybe an aura, maybe a combat trick. But in Theros, like, they pushed all of those things, and they made it work. They added Bestow and just other things to target. And they're not going to put in Heroic if it doesn't work. They're not going to put it in as a trap. So I just have to learn to be like, oh, okay, like, this is what they're trying to make me do. I have to imagine it's at least possible and maybe even good. And just kind of go with the direction that they point me in.
Yeah, and mine's actually somewhat along those lines. The thing I learned was to keep it simple, right? When we saw Bestow, it looked great. We thought it was great, and it was great. But what we didn't do is take that out to the extremes, right? It was so great, in fact, that it went all the way down to the lower end Bestow creatures as still being great, right? And we weren't able to quite bridge that gap until actually playing with it. And I don't blame us necessarily, but like, Bestow is sweet. Like, it was just really good in this set, and we kind of knew it, and we cut it short of somewhere. But I think we could have just realized, no, this is just really, really good, and it's going to be good whenever it's resolved. So, I like keeping it simple with stuff like that. If it's just really good, just recognize that it's really good and just accept that.
Yeah, I like that one.
It's hard to do sometimes. We get a little fancy play about stuff sometimes, and it's easier. Sometimes it's just like you look back, you're like, that card was just always going to be good. Like, there was no discussion there. That card's just awesome, and that's it.
Yeah, we kind of overthought it a little bit, maybe.
Right. All right. Before we wrap up, how was the set? Like, give me. We're leaving the set now. This is our last major discussion about Theros, Born of the Gods, Journey in the Nyx, this whole Greek Roman god cycle of mythology and all that. Did you like it? Did you love it? How's it going to be? Are you going to be drafting it in 5 years?
I think so. Like, I think I'll be pleasantly surprised if it comes back on Flashback on Magic Online, or got some packs sitting around. Hey, you want to run that set back? I think it'll be fun. It'll be a fun set to add into Grab Bag. Has a lot of mechanics that could play interestingly with other sets. Overall, like, it wasn't doing anything that crazy. It really felt like Magic. It wasn't like Rise of the Eldrazi where you're making battle cruisers and that's the only thing that matters. Because in Theros, some people are making battle cruisers, some people are just making stuff and attacking with it. Some people are playing control and killing stuff or whatever. You were still doing pretty normal stuff. I really like that. I don't like when magic is too bizarre. And I thought it was pretty well executed. Once the full block was out, especially because it really made the five colors feel pretty equal to me, and I like that too. I don't like when there's like, oh, there's that one color that's so bad it's a gambit. You know, if you're the only person drafting at the table, it's good, but if you're fighting for it with anybody else, then it's bad. I hate that. So I just thought like it's balanced. Aggro was good, control was good. You could play with the mechanics in your in mind, but you didn't have to. You could play an all around just solid deck as well. Didn't force your hand, but kept your options open. So overall, I liked it. I would give it like a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, I'm along the same lines. I think that the number one thing that I'll take away from Theros was balance, right? It wasn't the most super exciting set, but it wasn't boring. It always kept my attention. I drafted it the whole way through. I never got to a point where I'm like, this format's broken, or they just made such a huge mistake that I don't want to play this anymore. Never even close. I think the biggest downside to the block was that Born of the Gods was a little boring, right? It didn't really mix it up enough. I didn't need anything huge fireworks, but it really didn't give me, even like a firecracker. It was just a little bit like, well, here's some more Theros cards that we didn't put in Theros and we put in this set instead. Inspired, like I said, was a little uninspiring. And so that was a little bit of a downside, but I thought Journey to Nyx kind of picked it up nicely at the end, with, Enchantment Fall, whatever it's called, Constellation. And, I think that, on the whole, it was solid. Like, I think that like, if I wanted to show somebody what limited magic's about, I think that Theros would be a really good place to be like, this is it, because it's easy to forget that formats tend to get skewed heavily towards certain colors and towards certain strategies, and Theros never did. It didn't.
Right.
Like, you could play any colors you wanted pretty reliably. Sure, some are better than others. Don't take it as everything's exactly the same. But most of the popular color pairs were pretty diverse. It wasn't like, oh, he had the blue-green deck, so I just lose. Right, like that happened. There was format. In fact, that happened in what's it called, the Avacyn Restored. If they had blue green, you lost. Like, you just couldn't compete. Even
Right.
if you had a good version of another 2-color deck, if they had a medium or good version of blue green, you lost. There's just no answers for the stuff that they did, and you were just going to die. In this format, none of that. You would be able to play against pretty much anything with almost any 2-color combo, as long as you had a decent deck with a decent curve and creatures and stuff. And I love the flexibility options that we got with Monstrosity, with Bestow, with Scry. I love the fact that those help smooth out draws and give people more options without, like I said, weighting it too heavily towards the skilled players. I thought that the set was flavorful and fun. If you're into the whole, Greek mythology thing, there was a lot for you to pay attention to. I thought that the storyline stuff was cool from the videos that I saw. Overall, I give this set a big thumbs up. I will draft it again for sure. It is not going to crack my top 5 or top 3 or whatever favorite draft arc of all time. But if I was at a shop and somebody's like, hey, do you want a triple Theros? I'd be like, yeah, for sure. Let's do it. Where like if somebody came up and said, hey, do you want to do Scars of Mirrodin block? I'd be like, okay, like whatever. Like, I'm not excited by that, but I'll draft it with you. Where this one I'd be like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I'd like to do a Theros draft. And I hope to be able to revisit it again on Magic Online when they bring it back at some point, and I think I'll have a good time with it.
Yeah, we say goodbye to Theros block on the show, but I'm probably going to be drafting some this weekend.
Yeah. I mean, it's not gone yet, right? It's
Yeah.
just for the show purposes, we have to start ramping up for M15 next week. Don't miss it. We're going to be doing episode 241, and that is going to be a fun show. And it's also going to be informational because we got to bring you value, right? It's episode 241. We're not going to leave you without value. And we're going to give you 2 shows in one, basically. One of them is going to be the instructional one about card advantage, and the other one's going to be sort of a guest-driven retrospective about the podcast in general. So that is going to be really fun. After that, we're in full M15 mode. We're doing the set review shows are going to be coming up. I don't know if we're going to do a rules show for this one.
I don't think we need to.
I don't think we need to for the core set. There's going to be like Convoke. There's one mechanic that is coming back. It's not even new. So, I don't think that we need to go through the whole show for that. But yeah, we're going to be in full M15 mode, and I'm really excited about that to start talking M15 because, like I said, I got to do a couple of preview articles already, and one of them's already up. The other one's going to be up next week, and there's some pretty sweet stuff in there. It looks like a fun set.
Yeah, they've been doing a great job with these core sets, and I'm just as excited about them as I am with the expert expansions.
Yeah, I kind of had a section on my column where I talked about that, where I'm just like, look, I'm an unabashed fan of core set draft. Like, I just love it. Like every time M13 is in my top 3, like not core sets, drafts, like draft formats. Like it's that good for me. So anyway, thanks guys for hanging out this week. If you want to send us an email, very easy to do, lr@lrcast.com. If you'd like to follow myself or Brian on Twitter, I am Marshall_LR. Brian is Brian_LR. Very easy to find us on there. Very easy to find us to ask questions or give us feedback or just say, hey, Twitter's a great place for Magic players to interact. If you would like to join the Limited Resources clan on Magic Online, it's also easy to do. Send me a message, Marshall_LR. Only 2 rules. You got to love Magic. You can't be a jerk. If you meet those requirements, I'll get you in the clan. You can do the LR Cube drafts and chat with other clannies, and also just get the little name next to your thing so that you show your LR colors. For all things Limited Resources, lrcast.com. Thanks, guys. We'll talk to you next week.
Oh boy, Marshall, I've made a huge mistake. About an hour into the United States World Cup game, I was freaking out. Like I'm like panicked over here. So I did something I don't normally do. I made a bargain.
Uh-oh.
Please God, if you just let the United States make it out of the group stage, well, I'm not normally superstitious, but I am when it comes to sports. And not paying off on my end is almost certainly bad karma. So here we go. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with a light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Feels a lot better.
That was really good.